Hi everyone, this is Robert and welcome to IDG Live. This is an open Q&A, so we've got questions on lots of different things. Obviously there will be quite a few about House of the Dragon. Episode 7, I thought was really good. I really enjoyed it, I have to say. Did veer a bit away from the book lore, but we've got these two different kinds of lore now, so I guess that's okay. And we've got questions on that. We've got questions on the wider world of A Song of Ice and Fire. We've also got a few questions on Rings of Power, Lord of the Rings. So we will move around a little bit, but I will try and do things roughly in that order. First of all, House of the Dragon. Secondly, A Song of Ice and Fire. And then thirdly, Lord of the Rings and other stuff. So it's probably just worth saying, if you're watching this live or within a few days of it airing, the season 2, episode 8 has leaked, or at least parts of it have leaked. The spoiler warning for this is you're not going to get any spoilers. Nothing that came from that. um, I won't talk about it. I've not seen those leaks. I don't know what those leaks were, so I won't be saying anything about that. If you're in the live chat, I know that the moderators will be zapping anything that tries to spoil things for people. So that's the basic rule, as we always say on this channel. Show spoilers are not okay. We will happily talk about what happens in trailers and official things like that, but anything from leaks, no. Book spoilers are okay. Now, they veered a little bit away from the books, but obviously we will talk about what happens in the books, and it may happen on the TV show. So that's where we're at. So let's just get straight into the questions. Feel free to drop whatever you want in terms of questions into the chat, and I will pick up as many of them as I can as I go through. I've got a lot of questions from my patrons, so we'll start there. George R.R. Tolkien saying, "Salutations, Robert." And to you too, sir. "I'm assuming now that Rhaena is pretty much confirmed to be Sheep Stealer's rider, now that she's gone venturing out into the Vale absolutely alone. I'm not mad at this change. I think it's good that they gave Daemon some father-daughter bonding time, and it was a bit foreshadowed by Laena asking Daemon, is he watching over their children? Maybe this is the reason that Rhaenyra will start to resent him for leaving her children alone, and we know how the rest plays out. It all seems to work. Introducing a whole new character on top of the dragon seeds and Corlys's bastards would be a bit too much for casuals to grasp onto. Are you sold on the Rhaena merger theory?" Right. So this is quite a big one, and I think the first thing to say is that maybe wishful thinking. I don't know. It's still not 100%. As we leave it with episode 7, she has gone off into the wilderness. She's clearly looking for the dragon. She clearly is going there, I think, with a view to trying to bond with the dragon. She's been set up as somebody who is feeling quite down about not having a dragon, not being able to play her part. She's feeling quite patronized by having to babysit all of these younger Targaryens. So she's clearly heading off in order to do that. Now, when I say it's not 100%, I think we're looking 80, 90% certain now. But it's possible they could pull this back. It's possible that she could head out there and find the dragon, and then find this woman, Nettles, bringing the dragon sheep. So if they wanted to, even now, if they wanted to, they could bring this back. But the way that they've set this up, it's not so much the fact that Rhaenyra's headed off, but the way they've set this up is, as you say, with Laena challenging Daemon, Dream Laena challenging Daemon, are you caring for or taking care of our children? And Daemon seeming to be going on this character arc that is pushing him towards being slightly more responsible. That is setting this up for Rhaenyra replacing Nettles. So Nettles not appearing at all, and Rhaenyra taking Nettles' place as the rider of Sheepstealer. So if we go down this thought experiment, what does this mean? Well, first of all, uh, I'm not 100%. The way they presented it, the idea that Raina could just wander off into the wilderness without anyone noticing and caring about that. So the guys who were taking the three younger Targaryens down. I mean, it's a long trek actually from uh, the Erie all the way across to Gulltown, which is presumably where they were going from, and nobody looked back to check. That doesn't quite work for me. Uh, but I'm willing to kind of hand wave that away. But let's kind of play this forward. Let's say that Rainier is now going to be Nettles. And so season 3, presumably, Damon's character arc is I'm going to look after my daughters. And oh, here's one of my daughters. She's got a dragon. I'll spend some time with her. We'll do a bit of father-daughter bonding. It's great. Why, at the end of this? Well, first of all, why in the history books is this recorded as Nettles, not Raina? Secondly, why would she head off into the mountains of the moon at the end of all of this, which is what happens in the books, and not kind of claim her inheritance in any way, shape, or form? Why? What happens? Something has to happen between now and then to make her go, well, that's it. I've just noped out of society. I'm just going to go off into the mountains. I'm going to have, you know, forage for whatever food I can get. I'm not going to play a part in the future of the Seven Kingdoms. I'm just going to sit here and the mountain clans will treat me like a god. There has to be a reason, a character arc reason why she goes down that. We're very focused on Damon's character arc here, not so focused, I think, on Raina's character arc. How, if she is now becoming Nettles, how does she get from the point she's at now to the point where she could just say, "No, I'm just abandoning civilization and I'm going to live in the mountains"? Because that will happen over the course of the next season or two. It's not clear yet. Maybe they'll come up with a really good reason. I don't know, but we have to be aware that that is where that character's going. Secondly, this means we need to start thinking about mourning. Now, mourning is the dragon. So in the books, what happens is that she heads off to the Vale and she takes with her some dragon eggs, 3 dragon eggs, and she prays over them regularly and tries to hatch one. And one does hatch, and it's fantastic. And that dragon becomes Morning, and that is the last properly birthed dragon that we know of. And when we get into the Regency, which is what follows the Dance of the Dragons, this is a huge thing. She has a dragon which she can ride. Dragons, once more, there's some wonderful flowing prose actually in Fire and Blood, where she rides Morning over King's Landing. And it feels like suddenly the dragons are back. We thought all the dragons were gone, but now the dragons are back. And obviously something's going to happen later on in the story. The Fire and Blood Part 1 finished while Morning was still there. Raina was flying her around. It's all good. But what happens to Morning? If Raina is suddenly Nettles and just disappears off with Sheepstealer into the mountains of the moon, are we going to say there's no Morning? Are we going to say then that that whole part of the story of the Targaryens, the last properly hatched dragon, that just did not happen? So there's a whole load of questions, and this isn't me. I should probably say I'm not having a go here at the show. I'm just saying there are questions they need to answer. They I'm sure can answer them, but I'm not yet fully bought into this. I think the Nettles has a big role to play in the books, and I think that they need to show how taking her away and substituting in Raina will actually work, because it's not just a matter of Damon's character arc, and I mean, we shouldn't just think of this in terms of Damon. It's also in terms of the arc of the other characters. Why on earth would Rayna do the things that Rayna does as Nettles if she is Rayna. Okay, so let's quickly flick through the chat. Northern Tommy, thank you, saying no morning. It sounds like we can consider it the long night. Yeah, I see what you're doing there. That's Chaos Theory saying, what if Nettles tames the cannibal or grey ghost instead? Yeah, so those are the two other non-ridden dragons that are on Dragonstone. I think Cannibal, no. Cannibal, the whole point of Cannibal is that Cannibal represents dragons. Sometimes they reject everyone. Sometimes they're just creatures who just go out there and fire and blood and eat things. Let's go to Michelle Ramo saying, we need mourning. I want my Barbie pink dragon. And also symbolically for the story, she's the dawn of a new Targaryen age or generation. Yeah. So, I mean, I don't wish to sort of draw too strong a conclusion from all of this, but I would say that if they go down this route of Rayna actually being Nettles, so we don't have Nettles, so Rayna is actually going to disappear from this and she's going to go off into the mountains of the moon, then the chances of having a Regency TV show are hugely diminished, because they're taking out, it shows that they're not thinking about that. They're thinking about the Dance of the Dragons as being the important thing, and what happens beyond that is not part of the calculations. So if they go down that route, okay, fine. That's where show canon has gone. But I think it clearly shows that they've not thought about the Regency, which I'm quite sad about, because I love the Regency. I think it's a fantastic period. And I think from here they'll then go back to Aegon's invasion or wherever it is, and the Regency will be low down the list of things that they want to do. Samir Harmon, thank you very much for those kind words in the chat. Andrew Kay saying, to me, it's Nettle's origins that set it apart. A girl from the streets with no guidance or experience around dragons, such a different dynamic. Yeah, again, absolutely, that's true. If you change it to Rayna taming Sheep Stealer, then it's just, yeah, but this is Daemon's daughter. Of course, she's got an advantage here. The whole thing about Nettles is that she doesn't look Targaryen. She doesn't seem to have any Targaryen ancestry. Nobody really knows what's going on with Nettles, why this might work. But, which they've kind of captured on the show, to be fair to them, they have kind of captured this idea that Rhaenyra's like, I've no idea now. I thought I understood about dragon bonding. I've now no idea. And that is the kind of feel that Nettles brought, is that how does this happen? But yeah, if they replace Nettles with Rhaenyra, then suddenly you're back in that, oh, okay, so you do need Targaryen ancestry. Nettles brought in the idea that maybe you don't. Let's go to a question from. Oh, and actually, I should probably say the other thing that I'm kind of with George R. R. Martin here about the roaming dragons thing. There's a whole wormhole if you wish to go down that route. But the idea that a dragon just moves from Dragonstone off to the Vale, hundreds and hundreds of miles away, it doesn't hang right with the wider lore. So that's another thing that I've got against it. TV shows always slightly kind of blur a few of these laws, but this does seem quite an egregious example. Caleb Veers saying, hi, Robert, I'm new to the Patreon. Welcome. And I should probably just say, if you do want to support the channel, Patreon is the best way to go. You can be a channel member here on YouTube. in which case, thank you very much. But the best way to support this channel, if you wish to do so, is through Patreon. There are links everywhere, so you can find it. And I try and prioritize questions from my patrons in these live streams. So that's kind of what I pay back. But Caleb Veer saying, you might have talked about it already, but I wanted to know your thoughts on Willam being beheaded in front of a weirwood tree. This is Willam Blackwood. And then Rassler also asked, how do you think House Blackwood will respond to Willam's execution? Will Bendicott accept this and follow Damon and Oscar, or will he withdraw his troops? So there's a couple of things going on here. So, episode 7, we have Willam Blackwood, who Damon basically said, go off, commit war crimes. He didn't say it in exactly those words, but he basically said, go off, do whatever you need to do to bring these people to heel. And then when we get to episode 7, he's sort of scapegoated. Now, whether or not Damon, I had assumed what would happen was that Damon, in order to win everyone's trust, he would proactively execute Willam Blackwood. But it turns out actually this was Oscar Tully, who seems to be a little bit of a slightly precocious lord, getting the vibe, understanding how this works, and forcing Damon to execute Willam Blackwood. Now, there's a couple of layers here. The political layer is that this was Oscar Tully throwing his weight around, not just in terms of getting the respect of the River Lords, but also showing Damon, okay, Damon, you're going to do what I tell you to do right now. And that, in and of itself, the political aspect, Oscar Tully has done really well and gained their support. The second element, 3 elements I can think of here. The second element is the House Blackwood political element. So what happens now? We get Willam has been executed. How do the rest of House Blackwood operate? Well, I suspect they'll, if they know and understand the political situation, they'll just kind of go with it and say, okay, fine, one of our guys got killed, but the rest of us, we'll go with the flow. We are actually Team Rhaenyra. Let's not forget, it's not that they don't want to be Team Rhaenyra. They are. They support her, and one person overstepped the mark. I kind of get the feeling. So we get 2 members of Team Blackwood, 2 Blackwoods that we really get to know a bit more in Fire and Blood. One is Bendicott Blackwood, Bloody Ben, as he becomes known. He, in the books, he's quite young, but he becomes the new lord, not Oscar. He becomes the new lord of not Oscar, sorry. Oscar's obviously the Tullys, but he becomes the new lord of the Blackwoods after the Battle of the Burning Mill. You remember that battle that we saw, the aftermath of a few episodes ago. He becomes the new lord, and he just throws himself into this war, and he becomes known as Bloody Ben because of how ferocious he is, and not just him personally, but he orders his people to be ferocious as well. And so I think we'll probably see that. I think we'll probably see House Blackwood go, okay, fine, we lost a guy. We're still behind Team Black, and we'll still push on. So that's the first one. The second hasn't been cast, as far as I'm aware, just yet, which is Alison Blackwood. Now, she is a hugely important character, not just because she's quite cool during the war, but also when Cregan Stark comes south much, much later, he has the only army that is left, really. And when he gets to King's Landing, he can do whatever he wants because he's in charge. He becomes the Hand of the King. He has the Hour of the Wolf. And what becomes clear is that the restraining factor on him is the fact that he falls in love with Alison Blackwood. and then they head back up north. So we've got 2 Blackwoods, and I think we'll basically see Willam Blackwood as just like okay, he's done. He's out of there. He did his bit, and now we can move on. Andrew K saying Blackwood's quite forgiving in that instance. Never thought of them as such. Yeah, I mean, I don't know whether forgiving is the right. Pragmatic is probably the way I would see it. Cindy saying, when in doubt in Harrenhal, blame Alice. I think that's probably fair. And let's go to. Actually, I said there were 3 things. The third thing about that, I don't know whether you were kind of hinting at here. This meeting when we get Oscar Tully throwing his weight around, Damon being forced to execute Willam Blackwood. That happens in front of the weirwood tree. So perhaps this is a sacrifice in front of the weirwood tree. They talk a lot about, we follow the old ways, and they play up quite a bit, which is more on the TV show, it has to be said, than in the books. This idea of the old gods and the new in the Riverlands. In the books, House Blackwood are very strongly old gods, but everyone else they've moved on to the new gods. But here, the Riverlords, it seems, on the show, they seem to be presenting them as people who respect both the old and the new. And so a sacrifice in front of the weirwood tree, even if it's not intentionally done as a sacrifice to the weirwood, the blood will sink into the soil. The roots of the weirwood are there. What does all this mean? Well, the idea is that in the olden days, you would do lots of sacrifices to the weirwood tree before you did some big magic of the old gods' magic kind of thing. So, for example, when we had the Hammer of the Waters way back thousands of years ago, we're told that thousands of people were sacrificed before the weirwood tree in order for that magic to work. So, if you sacrifice someone in front of a weirwood tree, that might make magic work. So expect to see potentially on this. I mean, it's slightly tinfoiler, but we can go with it. They're playing up the magic in Harrenhal. Expect to see some magic happen in some way, shape, or form in the next few episodes. Maybe next episode, maybe early next season. But that's what you would expect if you do a sacrifice in front of the weirwood tree. Let's go to Addam Geets saying, hello, Robert and Dan. I'm really enjoying the backstory of Hugh Hammer. His book character was very straightforward and one-dimensional. I'm eager to see how the show leads us down the path to his and Ulf's betrayal. Do you think the fact that his wife is now in Tumbleton will play a role, or was that mentioned just to give a mention to an important town later in the story? So yeah, we got a couple of mentions of Tumbleton. My brother is in Tumbleton. Let's go there. And she seems to be going to Tumbleton, as far as we can tell. And he seems to be heading off to Dragonstone. So what does this mean? Well, yes, they're planting the name in our sort of subconscious because nothing will happen there for 4 or 5 episodes at the very, very earliest of next season. The point about Hugh is he gets this massive dragon, huge Vermithor, the second biggest, possibly the most fearsome dragon that's left, really ancient, really scary. We saw Vermithor in action, and just like, let's just kill 30 people randomly. That's what Vermithor's about. Now, Hugh Hammer starts out doing the few things that he's told to do. There's the Battle of the Gullet, there's the claiming of King's Landing, but then after that gets sent over down to Tumbleton. There's a battle at Tumbleton. This is book spoilers, but basically, do you remember that Hightower army that we've heard so much about? They're slowly heading up from Old Town, and they reach Tumbleton, which is, I mean, it's not a huge amount of the way there, but it's sort of maybe nearly half of the way to King's Landing. And they get bogged down. There's lots of attacks and battles on the way. They get bogged down. But Team Black send a couple of dragons over there. This is Vermithor and Silverwing. So we get Hugh Hammer and Ulf White. They go over there. And basically, when they get there, they turn coats, they change sides. And then eventually they get to the point. Hugh Hammer then he hears this prophecy. This prophecy about the dragon being defeated by the hammer, and he thinks, "Hey, that's me. I've got a hammer." Um, it seems to go to his head. We hear that he thinks about maybe I could be king, and eventually he dies. Hashtag spoilers. Now, where does this go? Basically, in the book, we're not given any backstory for him, and we're just sort of told he's not trustworthy. He's a bastard. We don't know where he is. The moment he got on his dragon, he was already thinking, "Oh well, how do I get the most out of this? How do I get the best from me?" This adds another layer. Because if he gets sent to Tumbleton, let's just imagine he does the original things here. He helps out the Battle of the Gullet. He helps out with the taking of King's Landing. Then he gets told, "Can you go down to Tumbleton? Because the town's under attack. The high towers are moving forward." And of course, he's going to go down. He hears that my wife's in Tumbleton. So he flies down. What we know about Tumbleton is that Tumbleton is the worst of this war. We see horrors, lots of horrors, all around this war, but Tumbleton, we're told, is the worst. The the town that just gets, first of all, it's the dragon fire. Secondly, it's the soldiers going through and doing horrific things to the population, and then again, and then again. Imagine Hugh, who we're told again and again this season, his whole arc this season was about how much he loves his family. Imagine he gets sent to Tumbleton and he finds that something horrendous has happened to his wife. And the only reason he went to get a dragon was because he wanted to protect her. If only I had a dragon. I couldn't protect my daughter. If only I had a dragon, then I could protect you. That is the point at which he could flip. We've already seen his anger. We've already seen how twice now. First of all, when the food arrived in King's Landing, he grabbed someone and said, "Where's this food from?" And the person said, "It's down there, over there at the docks. Rhaenyra's sending it." And what does Hugh do? Does he let this guy go and then go down and try and get something? No, he stops this guy, completely random person, and punches him, and then takes the food that person was probably taking to their family and takes it and goes to his family. That, we understand the motivation, but that shows another side to him, a slightly darker side. And then when we get to him there claiming Vermithor, one of the things that seemed to work, there are probably a lot of factors in play here, but one of the things was his bravery. And he's just shouting at Vermithor. And it's like, "Come on, I'm ready." And he has that other side to him. So, mentioning Tumbleton was not just a random, let's just sow this seed for people to be aware that there's a place called Tumbleton. This is where his destiny is and where he will flip, where his character arc flips. Let's go to a question from Wrestler is related to this, saying, "Good day, Robert. I hope you and Dan the dog are well. We are, thank you. Loved episode 7, but I found the decision to kill Hugh's daughter off screen an odd choice, seeing as his initial reaction would have added to his character's choices in the episode." Yeah, I mean, I kind of agree. I do wonder whether this was a deleted scene. We generally find deleted scenes later, and they'll release a few randomly. It kind of feels like the sort of thing where you would go, okay, can we cut that? Is that actually necessary? This is about getting Hugh over to Dragonstone. If he mentions that his daughter's dead, is that enough? So it feels to me like they, whether it actually is a deleted scene or whether they just thought about it, they decided, well, we'll do the shortest version here. Everyone knows he's got a sick daughter. Everyone knows that his daughter was getting very ill, to the extent that Hugh had to be carrying her around. Then afterwards, we see that yeah, it would have been good. Maybe it just didn't work as a scene. I don't know. It's quite hard to understand because we're obviously not there. Maybe for whatever reason that just isn't, an actor didn't really capture the moment, or the direction didn't quite work, or maybe it just felt a little bit slow when they added all the different scenes together. We don't know all of the reasons here, but yeah, I would have liked to see another aspect of Hugh, but I think we understand the point here. We've seen that family is his driving force. So, and we've seen and we understand that he will now have a sense of loss, that he now feels that he has to do everything he can to protect his wife, and he thinks that that is by getting a dragon. So, the plot points are there. It's the character stuff that perhaps we've lost. Let's go with a question from Adam Geets saying, "Hello, Robert and Dan. Looking ahead to season 3. Let's finish season 2 first, but we can definitely answer this one. It would seem they have several big battles to cover, including the fish feed, the battle over the God's Eye, the Battle of the Gullet, and at least the first Battle of Tumbleton. This seems like too much action for one season, considering all the work to show the dragons. Do you think they will try to slow the pace down to spread the action out more?" Yeah, I mean, it's possible. So we've basically been told, in terms of how many seasons this is, we've been told 4 or maybe 5. And the decision point here is at season 3. So I think season 1, pretty obvious, the build up to the dance. Season 2, very roughly, whether they match this up exactly, but very roughly up to the fall of King's Landing. We get the bulk of the actual dance happening next. Now, it kind of works for me as an arc to take it from the fall of King's Landing to the next fall of King's Landing. But maybe they think, yeah, as you say, there's a lot of battles going on there. I mean, I don't know if they've got the budget for it, and if they can do it with CGI, and these things do get better over time. So, where we're going to be in a year, 18 months, 2 years' time, maybe having big dragon battles won't seem as big an issue. I don't know. But season 2, of all the complaints I've heard about season 2, the one that seems to stick the most with some people is there's not enough action. It's been quite slow in some ways, a lot of character development, particularly Damon and Harrenhal. Rhaenyra has largely stayed where she is. Alicent, a lot of the time they didn't seem to really know what they wanted to do with her as a character. She was staying in King's Landing. So a lot of the main characters didn't really get involved in action. So maybe season 3 they will rectify that and have lots of action. I don't know. I've said many times, if I were doing this, I would do roughly, in terms of timescales, not details of episodes, but in terms of timescales, season 1, yeah, absolutely. Season 2 seems to be going up to roughly the fall of King's Landing. Season 3, I would take it up to the second fall of King's Landing. Season 4, I would say, is like when everything just goes terrible. And then season 5, personally, I'd move on into the Regency, but I think now they're not doing that. In terms of how they might cover so many battles, plot important battles. So we had the Battle of the Burning Mill, if you remember back episode, whatever it was, 3 or 4 or something. The beginning of that episode, they just showed the start and then cut to the end so we could see the aftermath. And that worked really well. I don't think they can do exactly that same kind of thing, but it's entirely possible that they could do some creative way of showing us a battle without showing us all of the intricacies of what happened. So the battles that happen in the Riverlands, I think most of them we can largely, I wouldn't say skip past, but they're not hugely important. What's important is what happens to Kristen Cole. And then the fact that all of these armies which are heading towards the Riverlands, they just massacre each other. So those are the important points to take away. We don't actually have to see the battle for all those things. Tumbleton, we do need to see some stuff. The battle over the God's Eye Lake, yes, we need to see stuff. Whether they do that at the end of season 3 or maybe at the beginning of season 4, I don't know, but they will have to show that. But that's 2 dragons battling. It's not lots of dragons. It will take work and effort, but it's not hugely complicated. The Battle of the Gullet, they will need to include in some way in season 3, but again, it's not. They don't need to show huge amounts of conflict. The dragons are definitely there, and they will appear, but it's not hugely complicated stuff. I wouldn't have thought. Let's have a quick flick through the chat. They have, let's just have a quick flick through. So Edinson X saying, I just looked up Hugh Hammer's actor, Kieran Bew. According to IMDb, he's done a good amount of Doctor Who related work. I'm all for casting more Doctor Who related actors. I did not know that. I'm now going to have to look to see who he has been in Doctor Who. I wonder whether he didn't have his beard. Okay, so let's I'll come back to that. If you let me know if you're a Doctor Who person, if you're a Whovian, just let me know in the chat who he's been, because I'm now very intrigued. But he ends, Fat Sister saying, I enjoy reading about the Regency, but it seems very dragonless. Yes, I mean, there are some dragons during the Regency, but this is the build up to the death of dragons as much as anything else. So the bits that I'm fascinated in more than anything else was kind of like the Maester's plot and the politicking, the coups, that kind of thing. Constantine Tranos, what are your thoughts on all the Targaryen bastards being in King's Landing instead of Dragonstone? Are there any towns in Show Dragonstone at all? Well, I mean, this is obviously a show versus book thing. In the book, there are settlements in Dragonstone, particularly the port area. There's a town that's there. On the show, when they started out, obviously with Game of Thrones, and it was basically an island with a castle on. They need to expand that a bit for House of the Dragon, but they've not really expanded it out to look and feel like the books. The docks are, I mean, they might have a couple of buildings down at the docks, but not much. So this is one of those, it's more of a kind of a subtle, nuanced moment, but this is one of those things where you go, okay, so the show canon here, there aren't lots of people living on Dragonstone outside of the castle. In the books, yes, absolutely. So it's a show versus book canon thing. Let's go to Maura Lee. House of the Dragon has one more episode left. Will we see any more major battles, or do you think we'll have to wait until season 3 for battles like the Battle of the Gullet? What do you think of the last episode, especially how they portrayed the dragon seeds linking up to their dragons? Well, just on the first part of that, the Battle of the Gullet, we've not seen anything about the Battle of the Gullet anywhere. Battle of Gullet, for those who don't know, big sea battle, and we've not seen it appear in trailers. We've not heard people talking about it. I think it's fair to say that this is a season 3 thing, and they can do this relatively swiftly, relatively easily. In book canon, that happens before the taking of King's Landing, but if they shift the order, actually fine. It doesn't make huge amounts of difference. This is one of those things where they in the book, it's important that the Battle of the Gullet happens first because it makes Rhaenyra angry, and she then decides to launch an attack on King's Landing after a long period of her basically not being involved in the action. On the show, they've had her at the center of the action all the way through. They've shown her a path where she's moving from someone who's trying to find peace to someone who's wanting to go to war. So they've dealt with that on the show. So the Battle of the Gullet doesn't need to happen this season. It could happen next season. As for your other question about the dragon seeds, I think what I would add to this debate as something that I thought was really interesting was in the book, Jace is the one to suggest this. Jace is the one to say, "Hey, we could try and find some Targaryen bastards so they could ride dragons. They'll be on our side." I liked what they did on the TV show. I thought this was an extra layer going on there, that Jace realizes the political implications of what this is. And in case you kind of missed it or weren't quite sure, basically he's saying, so my claim as your heir is on the basis that you say that I'm your son. Lots of people say, actually, I'm a bastard. I don't look like a Targaryen. I don't have Targaryen looks. The main thing in the books, the main thing which bolstered his claim, which kind of proved that he was a Targaryen, was the fact that he rode a dragon. Now, what happens if you get someone come in who looks like a Targaryen and rides a dragon? That kind of proves that they're a Targaryen. They look Targaryen, and then you say, well, where do they fit into this family tree? If we're saying that Jace is a bastard, as most people kind of accept, as he himself knows is true, what if somebody says that they're the bastard of a previous Targaryen king? Does that potentially put them ahead of Jace in the succession? Does that potentially say, well, if you're actually a proper Targaryen because you can ride a dragon, does that mean that actually Jace's claim is undercut? Those are the kind of questions that are running through his mind and should rightfully be running through his mind. So we're left with this situation where he comes in and says, do you realize the implications of what you're doing? He's not the person pushing for this. He's the person saying, are you sure? And he's not the only person. You get Lord Celtigar, who's basically, I mean, he's old school, it's not right. They're not from noble birth, that kind of thing. And he's kind of easily dismissed. Then you get the dragon keepers who say this is an abomination. This should not be allowed. And then they go out. And Rhaenyra, and this is the thing which should stay with us is that despite all of this, despite her small council being a little bit uncertain, despite Lord Celtigar being definitely against, despite her own son saying, you do realise that this is jeopardising my claim, despite the Dragon Keepers who've been loyal to House Targaryen all this time, just saying, no, this is an abomination, despite all those things, she goes ahead anyway. That shows that this is a risk and a gamble in a way that doesn't 100% come across in the books. House Targaryen, and before that, the Valyrians and the Valyrian Freehold had kept dragon riding a monopoly. They had made sure that only this family or these families can ride dragons. What happens if you open that up? It suddenly House Targaryen isn't quite as special as it was before. If anyone can ride dragons, then why on earth should we say that the Targaryens have a natural right to rule? So there's lots of layers to this, and I think this is one thing I really like about what they did in the TV show was to show that this wasn't just like some really obvious decision that you get these people, then that's okay. This was a fundamental shift, absolute change in policy, centuries-long policy, made almost on a whim in order to try and guarantee you get air superiority in a war. So there's a lot going on there that I think that they showed a lot better on the TV show than it was in the book. Now, that's not dissing on the book in any way, shape, or form. That's just saying that they didn't dedicate a huge amounts of time to it. Andrew Kay saying what eventually happens with Hugh and Ulf, at least in the book, is a cautionary tale about loosening that monopoly. Yeah, absolutely. Um, Ygritte Weirwood saying Rhaenyra has no faith in Daemon to get an army or not to use it against her. If she can't get an army because neither her or Jace can go out, then she needs another firepower, so she goes for dragons. Yeah, absolutely. That's the logic they've got in the show, and I kind of understand it. She has, on the show, she has 3 potential armies. One that Daemon is potentially gathering, one that's from the north, which is great, but it's quite small, just 2,000 soldiers they were promised. And it's a long way away. It'll take a while for it to come. And then one from the Vale. And she surely, we're not actually shown the other side of this, but she surely will be aware that she promised a dragon to protect the Vale in exchange for the Vale looking after her youngest children. She didn't come through. She she provided them for a very short time a couple of hatchlings like dragons this big. She has not done what she promised on the show, and so she should not therefore expect the Vale to be coming through. She could have, and this is a decision on her part, she could have said, okay, Jace, I don't want you going out flying and attacking lots of things, but could you just base yourself in the Vale and protect the Vale? And that will mean that that releases a whole army and that can come out and help me. She doesn't do that. She makes a decision to basically renege on the deal that Jace made. Let's go to a question from not Mara Lee. I just did that one last time. And then Corvus Corax saying, hi, Robert. Last week's episode took me out of the story a bit with the odd Jaws-like angles and forced perspective of Vermithor and a poorly lit silvering. It made me realise I'd take B CGI if it meant more dragons on screen. Am I alone in this? I really thought we'd get more dragon action this season. What do you or even the chat think? Well, let me know in the chat what you think. My take is, I I didn't personally notice the CGI being bad at all in this episode. That's just me. I don't look for CGI. This isn't everyone. Some people are very CGI people, and they're focusing on it. I grew up watching really shonky special effects on fantasy TV shows. You know the kind of things. If you're 30s, 40s, whatever above, then you will be able to name some really bad effects of TV shows back in the day. That's what I grew up on, and you use your imagination, and so I'm okay with it. I completely understand some people aren't, but I didn't think that that was particularly poor CGI in any way, shape, or form. Maybe when I look back on it, I'll go, yeah, it was, but I was in the moment, and that was for me. That was the most important thing. Was I was in the moment there with Vermithor, and although this was a shift away from the book, I actually thought that worked really well. I liked the way they showed Vermithor. Just Rhaenyra said, "Okay, here's 30 possibles. Pick which one you want." And the way Vermithor was just like burning them, and you could just see the power of that dragon. And then the way that when Hugh appeared, that Vermithor was just like, huh? Who's this guy? Oh, okay. I choose this one. That actually really worked for me. I liked that a lot. Let's go to a question in the chat. Brienne's fat sister saying, explain what you think about the ages of Joffrey, Aegon the Younger, and Viserys in the show. They are so much younger, as are their dragons. How will this affect the show? They are. So there's a lot of ages changed a lot between the book and the show, and this has led to lots of different shifts. So uh, Baylor, for example, in the book is a lot younger and doesn't get involved in riding a dragon around. And the Alicent Rhaenyra thing, this was a huge thing back in season 1. In the book, Alicent is 9 years older than Rhaenyra, so they weren't besties as young people. Alicent married Viserys aged 18, Rhaenyra was aged 9. So their dynamic to start with was new stepmom and stepdaughter, not here's some besties and then, oh, hang on a moment, it's all a bit awkward, but I'm going to marry your dad. That wasn't the feel. So, in terms of the youngest members of Team Black, yes, they're a lot younger than they are. How does that affect things? Well, Viserys, not at all, would be my take, is that he, in the book, he will head off, get captured, disappear. He will reappear for the Regency, but if we're not doing Regency, then that doesn't hugely matter. Aegon is a lot younger, and I have got a question somewhere. I'll get to it at some point, but I'll sort of kind of answer this now. It's noticeable that they put Joffrey in there with those two. I do wonder whether that's because if we saw the baby dragon that we've got there for Aegon, that's not big enough to fly somebody all the way to Dragonstone. So maybe what we're looking at is Joffrey, who's been sent over on the show. He's been sent over with them on the Gay Abandon, and we could maybe see 2 Targaryens on the back of one dragon, small Targaryens. Joffrey is a lot younger than he is in the book, and Aegon, going a lot further forward, Aegon is a lot younger than he was in the book. Now, in the book, when Rhaenyra dies, Aegon is 10. He's not anywhere near 10 on the TV show. So that does impact on. I've done a couple of videos recently about Aegon's prophecy, this Song of Ice and Fire. How does it get passed down? Does it get lost at some point? It's conceivable that Rhaenyra could have told her 10-year-old child this prophecy, and the 10-year-old child could have remembered it. If this child is, I mean, I don't even know, your guess is as good as mine, but that the child that they've got playing baby Aegon is a lot younger than that. Is it conceivable that they could memorize what they're told as being the Song of Ice and Fire? I don't think so. So we're looking at some other route that this gets passed down. Does it get recorded? Does it get passed to someone else? We'll have to wait and see. LGD, thank you very much, saying, does anyone else find it strange that with the Baratheons descended from Aegon's bastard half-brother, no one was looking to them to ride dragons? Yeah, it is... the way that they played it on the show was that they looked back for official links first. This is where they got to Steffon Darkling. Are there any marriages between the Targaryens and other families? And then we can kind of look down that other family and say, well, you've got some Targaryen blood in you. So that was their stage one, and that wouldn't include the Baratheons because, yes, we get Oris Baratheon, who was probably the half brother of Aegon. That's still just rumor and a bastard child. So it kind of makes sense that they weren't included in that. And then what happens on the show is that they then go, let's go for the bastards. And it's just whoever answers the call. So it wasn't proactively going out and say, well, maybe we should try the Baratheons. Let's try the small folk is what they were. And this is probably as a result of who is it who's suggesting it in the show. And that's Messalina. And her first thought seems to be about the small folk in King's Landing. So in show canon, it kind of makes sense to me. In book canon, I get the idea. Maybe they should have proactively gone there. But let's not forget that the Baratheons in the book, they've kind of declared for Team Green, and they're kind of the cause of the death of Lucerys. So the idea of Rhaenyra sort of happily going over there saying, any like bastard children who want to ride a dragon, that doesn't quite work. She probably still bears a grudge. Let's go to a question from Paul Al-Gaib saying, hi, Robert. Alice Rivers said to Daemon that the River Lords always looked to the Tullys for guidance and stability. However, that's not really the case in the books, is it? They ruled the Riverlands for only 130 years at this point. It always seemed to me that they are by far the weakest Lords Paramount besides the Tyrells, maybe. Do you think the show just wanted an easy way out of the Daemon Harrenhal story, or is it a deliberate change to the books? I think there's an element of this, which is the show just wanted an easy way out. They could have said, they're the Lords Paramount, everybody will, in the Riverlands, people will follow the Lord Paramount. They could have just said that. But they didn't. And they went with this line of, for hundreds of years or whatever it was, they have followed them for their wisdom and guidance. They didn't say, so they haven't changed the law. They didn't say that the Tullys were the Lords Paramount for longer than that. They didn't say that they were kings. They said the River Lords looked to them for wisdom and guidance. So I think the implication is that even though the Tullys were never kings, even before they were Lords Paramount, people saw them as kind of like this honest broker in the Riverlands. Now, I think we can kind of see that. It's not 100% clear, but this is adding to the lore, then it's never 100% clear. But I think the first thing to say is that the Riverlands can be quite divided. We've got the Brackens and the Blackwoods always at war. We've got this kind of ever-revolving group of people who are there in Harrenhal. We've got a few other noble lords up to the north who are quite independent, like the Freys, like the Mallisters, who have their own very specific focus. The Tullys holding River Run, if you look back through their history, they've repelled a few Lannister invasions, they've generally been kind of like the honest broker, the middleman, the point at the center of the Riverlands. So we can sort of say, okay, maybe the other lords did follow them for advice, for wisdom. And we do have that one example above all else in the Riverlands where we have Aegon invading. And who was the first to realize that, you know what, the Targaryens, they're going to win this? It was the Tullys. The Tullys were the first to bend the knee, and then the others followed. So, at least in that one instance, we get to see the Tullys acting as leaders here. So I'm kind of okay with it. This idea that the Tullys, they may not have always ruled the Riverlands. They definitely weren't ever kings of the Riverlands, but they are the people that everyone around them kind of respects and will kind of follow their lead. Some like the phrase less than others, but the Brackens and the Blackwoods do need someone to be the sort of an honest broker between them. Um, April May saying when Aegon gave Harrenhal to the Cohoris, House Cohoris, they had him marry a Tully daughter too. Yeah, interesting. Let's go to a question from Vance saying, hello, Robert. Since the series started, I found the inclusion of the Dragon Keepers to the story very interesting. And in this last episode, they refer to themselves as an order. In Fire and Blood, Dragon Keepers are portrayed as an armed force keeping people away from dragons, but the show portrays them as very different. My hypothesis is that this order of Dragon Keepers are taught father to son, like, say, medieval blacksmiths, and descended from the original group brought to Dragonstone by Aenar Targaryen, and their loss will play a role in the dragons dying out. The loss of when they're gone, and then we get what happens with the dragon pit, their loss will play a role in the dragons dying out. The order resigns almost en masse, and the loss of accumulated knowledge would impair development and the health of young dragons and impair the existing eggs from hatching. Now, Amy Katina says a similar thing. Newish patron here. Welcome. I'm wondering about the Dragon Keepers going on strike. Would this be the beginning of the downfall of the dragons? So, what role do the Dragon Keepers play? Is the fact that they are sort of quitting, is that going to play a role in the downfall of the dragons as a whole? Yes and no is sort of my answer on this. So in the book, the Dragon Keepers are a more martial order, and their basic role is to stand guard outside the Dragon Pit. They were introduced, I think, by Jaehaerys, and that seems to be the extent of it. On the show, they've expanded this. They were there already. The implication, as you've said, the implication is that they must have come up, they're talking High Valyrian, they must have come across with the Targaryens from Valyria. They seem to have this really high view of dragons and who should be allowed to ride dragons. They seem very clear about that. And the kind of implication is they're not just guarding the dragons, but they're also they're there as a part of dragon bonding. So they're to go and grab a particular dragon. You want a dragon? Okay, I'll go and get that dragon for you. And I think probably the implication is they're there to tend to them. They're there to feed them, maybe. So they're the holders of the practical dragon lore. How do dragons work? How do we keep them alive? How do we make sure that they're happy? How do we introduce them to a new potential rider? That kind of thing. But it does seem clear that they are not needed for dragon bonding. Now, that's both based on what we see in the show, which is that they they quit, and then we get 3 dragon bondings happen in quick succession. So, and maybe even 4. So they are not necessary for that to happen. Are they necessary for dragon eggs to hatch? No, as far as we can tell. Several dragon eggs hatch in cradles and things like that. So, yeah, they can be involved in helping out, transporting, things like that, but they're not essential for it. Clearly, if they're not there, then this is not going to be good news for the survival of the dragon species. But I don't think, from what we've seen or read, they are the essential central part of all of this. The other thing I would say, if you are with me, though, in believing that the reason why the dragons ultimately died out after the dance is that the maesters poisoned the dragon eggs, you have to say, how could the maesters get to the dragon eggs? How could they get to the dragon eggs? Because there aren't dragon keepers around anymore. So their absence does have a role here, I think. But what we've seen is very clearly that they are not necessary for dragons to either bond or for eggs to hatch. So they can help out, but they're not the be-all and end-all. Luna Cascade saying, hello, Robert. How old does a dragon have to be before they're rideable and ready to handle battle? Which ones are not ready for the dance? All right, so how old does a dragon have to be? Well, a few years old. And this does seem to vary. Dragons grow at different rates. But we get, so for example, Morning was, I don't know, 3 or 4 years old, I think, when Morning was first ridden. Drogon seems to have been just, again, about that same age. Cesarion seems to have been, probably in the book anyway, a little bit older. So it's a few years, but when they're first ridden, they're quite small. It's only as but they get bigger and bigger as they grow old. So you can have a dragon and ride a dragon actually quite a young age. But for a dragon to be really useful in combat, that's a bit longer. Now, it's worth saying on the show, and this is also an issue in the book, is that Drogon grew hugely quickly on the show. Drogon was massive on the show. And given the fact that he should have been maximum 5 years old, that doesn't quite stack up with what we know. And when I say this is an issue for the books, it's because George R. R. Martin was going to include a 5-year break between his books. He was going to get people, and we see the remnants of this. He was going to get people in the right places. Arya was going to go to Braavos. Sansa was going to go to the Vale. Jon would be Lord Commander of the Night's Watch. Sam would be down in Old Town. You can kind of see that all of these characters were going to go to places, and they could stay, they could learn, they could grow. And that would also allow the dragons to grow. Eventually, he decided that he couldn't do the 5-year time gap for a variety of reasons. And as a result, he's now left with this issue of the dragons are not as old as Daenerys' dragons are not as old as perhaps he had previously wanted. So he does have to deal with this as an issue. And which ones are not ready for the dance is so Morning, who is not hatched yet, is not ready. The way we get Shrikos, the kiddies dragons, I think Jaehaerys and Jaehaera, both have teeny tiny dragons. Those are not ready for the dance. And we get Aegon, the future Aegon the Third's dragon, is just big enough to ride, but only just. And rideable is not combat worthy. It has to be said. Christy Moniz saying, "Still no Maelor. Thoughts on his absence?" Yeah. So Maelor is the third child of Aegon and Helena in the books. In the show, not there. Now, there was an argument, and the showrunners, one of the writers perhaps argued, I think reasonably, to be fair to them, why this was the case on the show, because they had to make some changes to make those last few episodes of season 1 work really well. The changes were constricting the timeline, and they could constrict the timeline or contract the timeline, I should probably say, uh, by just a year or two and make quite a big difference. And what they did was they pushed a whole load of events together. That episode 8, you remember this episode 8 was a fantastic episode where you get the last day basically of Viserys. And in order to add to it, they added various things that happened over the previous few years in the book. They squashed together into one day. And that restricted or contracted the amount of time that we have Aegon and Helena together, and they decided that meant that there just simply was not enough time for baby Maelor to exist. So, whatever views you may have, I think it's from a TV show perspective, I kind of understand where they came from, and that did make for some excellent episodes at the end of season 1. Then Ryan Condal has said Maelor does not yet exist in this timeline, which I interpreted as being, so this means that he may appear later. But for him to appear later, basically Helena has to be pregnant and then give birth. Now, if they were going to go down that route, they would probably have to have done that some point in the first half of the season, because we've had no hints in the second half of the season that she's pregnant. And the time at which Maelor in the books is an issue as a baby is shortly after the fall of King's Landing. Now, they could play around with the timelines here. They could do different things, I guess. But if they wanted to bring Maelor in, then they would have brought Maelor in this season, or at least mentioned the idea of the possibility of Helena being pregnant this season. And they haven't. George R. Martin in a blog post referred to him as Maelor the Missing, and I think we just go with that. I think they've basically written him out and said it doesn't affect the meta narrative of what happens in the dance, so I understand it on that level, but it's just a bit disappointing. I think I had one more chat. Yeah, so Titan111, do you think the guy who got his hand cut off in episode 6 is the shepherd? I also wanted to say thank you. You were the inspiration in setting up a channel on YouTube. Oh, well, I feel quite flattered by that. Thank you very much. If you've got a new YouTube channel, I will happily give you a shout out. I don't know what the channel's called, but I'm sure one of the moderators will find it and then give me a shout, and I will try and push people your way. So welcome. I always love new creators within, I don't know whether you cover Game of Thrones, but I always welcome new creators, and I think it's a fantastic thing. As for the first part of your question, do I think that the person who got his hand cut off in episode 6 is the shepherd? So there was that riot. You get Alicent and Helena, they were in the Sept. They come out, there's a riot, and she says, no, don't take out your weapons, don't attack people, to the Kingsguard, but they do, and they cut off one guy's hand. Now, why is that important? Because a hugely important character in what will probably be season 3 is the shepherd, is this rabble-rousing priest of the Faith of the Seven, who is basically arguing against everything to do with House Targaryen. Now, he has one hand. That's what we're told. He's lost a hand. The implication, maybe in war, maybe he was a thief. Who knows? But this could be his origin story. Now, probably for this, they will cast a new character. So whoever, I wouldn't suggest you go and zoom in on that character's face and go, "Oh, is that a famous actor?" No, I think they will probably, when we get to the Shepherd, they will cast someone good. And we had a whole load of suggestions last time I was talking about this. We had a whole load of suggestions in the chat. I loved the idea of Christopher Eccleston. I thought that worked really well. But is it? They'll probably leave it quite vague. They might say something like, "Where did you lose your hands? The Targaryens took it," and we're left to go, "Oh, was it that incident?" But it's not 100% clear. Uh, question from Luna Cascade. What do you think Helena meant when she told Alicent, "I forgive you"? Could she have been referring to something prophetic? Yeah, it's entirely possible. So Alicent was going around looking for forgiveness for the things that she did, and Helena just kind of like proactively turned around and said, "I forgive you." Now, season one, almost everything Helena said was prophetic in some way. Season two, they've kind of come back on it. I will look at her prophecy wall at some point, but the she's had a lot of conversations that aren't prophetic or obviously prophetic in any way. So, is her saying "I forgive you" prophetic about something which will happen in the future? It doesn't have to be. It could just be one of these conversations when she just sees that her mother needs that, and so she says it. But is there a chance this is about something Helena does in the future that Alicent forgives her for? Yeah, I think that works. I think we won't know until because they've shifted so much around. It could be a number of things. I initially thought I had this idea. Oh, if I were writing this, I know what I would do. Which is when we get Maelor, and if Maelor had been, so if Helena had been pregnant with Maelor, and then she'd given birth to Maelor just as King's Landing was falling, and then Alicent said, "Just this, you do realize this is the new heir, Aegon's heir. We have to keep Aegon's heir safe. Give me the baby. We'll put it with a Kingsguard and go." And spoilers, it appears not to be what's going to happen in the show, but Maelor doesn't make it. Maelor gets killed. And I thought that would be a thing that Helena could forgive Alicent for. "You stole my baby from me on the day that he was born, maybe even, and the baby went away and got killed. I forgive you." So, yeah, I could see that happening, but I don't think that is going to happen now. But there are other things they could do. Um, let's go to a question from Simon D saying, "After Rhaenyra and Mysaria kissed, I got the biggest Mushroom vibes. Do you think Mysaria has replaced Mushroom? I'm thinking in the end she will be the only one left in Rhaenyra's court like Mushroom was in the books. What do you think?" Well, I think this is an interesting observation because uh, Mushroom is not, for those who don't know who Mushroom is one of the characters who recorded what happened in the Dance of the Dragons and is used as a source in Fire and Blood. Fire and Blood is written as a sort of a history book. And Mushroom is one of the characters, one of the guys who recorded a history of the time that is used as a source. Now, he claims a lot. Basically, he claims he was in Rhaenyra's court, and basically he claims that she relied on him hugely. He had a whole load of these ideas personally. Pardon me. He had a whole load of these ideas personally, and there was a whole load of lewd behaviour involved as well. But they have given Masseria at least one line from Mushroom when she talks about the dragon seeds, and she says, "Oh, where you really need to be looking is under the sheets and in the wood piles," and that was a line that apparently Mushroom came out with. So, to a degree, yes, they have given her some lines. Also, this idea that the way the Mushroom presents this is that at the end, the only person that Rhaenyra could trust was him. They are setting this up to be the same with Masseria, is that she is trusting Masseria's judgment over everyone else right now. And so, yes, there is a kind of a merging of theme going on there. I don't think it's a full taking on the Cat Mushroom's character, but I think they're trying to take on some echoes of it. Callie Summers, will Aemond give Helena the push to finish her arc, or will Alicent just think so when she returns? Will we see Helena actually fly Dreamfire? So Helena is the bonded rider of Dreamfire, the dragon, who is an ancient dragon. It has to be said, and I think it's probably fair to say. So in the book, she did not ride her during the dance. I think it's probably fair to say that she won't do the same. She won't. She won't ride Dreamfire on the show either. It'll be quite a digression away from the book if they went down that route. A change in the character of Helena as much as anything else. So no, I don't think we're going to see Helena ride Dreamfire. Helena in the book, not right now, but in a bit, she will fall out of a window of Maegor's Holdfast and die impaled on spikes. Now, the implication of what we read is that this was not just her committing suicide. This was somebody pushed her. Now, who could have pushed her? Would Aemond push her? Given the timing, I think he's not there. This could have been someone else. They did do a bit of foreshadowing of this. It has to be said. If you look, then you can see that there's been some really good direction. I wish I had the pictures here in front of me to show you, but on at least 3 occasions, they have foreshadowed the fate of a character by what happens in season 2. So, first up, do you remember when Jace went there to talk to his betrothed Baelor? In Dragonstone, what happens? Baelor is there with a crossbow shooting and kind of shooting in his direction. And that's the key thing during their conversation. She's firing a crossbow. How does he die? I mean, given the context, it's pretty obvious. Aemond, back in the beginning of episode 2, he picks up a coin and kind of like puts it in front of his eye, and it's a picture of a god. It's the god's eye. Where's he going to die? The god's eye lake. Helena, when that riot happens, she gets pushed against the wall. You can go back and look at this. She gets pushed against the wall, and there are some spikes pointing out from that wall. This is foreshadowing. I think this is really good. They didn't get much notice, I don't think, but this is good foreshadowing in terms of the directors. How is this character going to die eventually? Well, we'll give some hints to that here. That the people who know what it is will see it and go, "Ah, yeah." Most people won't even notice, which is not exactly answering your question, because your question was who will push around. I am still, I don't know whether it's the opinion that, or whether this is just a tinfoil thing. It's probably close to tinfoil. Her daughter Jaehaera will suffer a very similar fate, almost certainly pushed out of a window. And I do wonder, Helena is set up to be a tragic character. I do wonder whether she sees what happens to Jaheira, and she kind of acts it out. And so she dies. She sees the death of her daughter, and then she experiences the suffering again by dying in the same way. Um, uh, Titan 111 saying thank you, and we are Old Men of the West. That's the new YouTube channel. So Old Men of the West. I'm assuming this is a Tolkien thing. Men of the West is very much a Tolkien phrase. Old Men of the West. Check it out. I know nothing about this, so I can only say I this person apparently got inspiration from me, and I thank you for that. So do go and check that out. Carolina Clay saying, "What's the point in making Helena less mad and less affected by the death of her son compared to the book, if not to have her more involved in the war and the politics?" Yeah, so in the book, at this point, what happens? So when her child dies, when I was about to say, blood and cheese happens, she she goes and hides in a room, basically, and she's not seen from again. She just goes. I mean, the Maesters in Fire and Blood, they call her mad, but basically she's stricken by grief. Now, she doesn't therefore have a huge amount of a role left, and on the show they've decided they don't want to go down that route. They want her there, and being increasingly clear about what she's saying as well. So she started out, what she was saying to start with was very vague, and this sounds prophetic, but I'm not 100% sure. It seems that what she's saying is a lot clearer all the time. So it's sort of the opposite arc. It makes sense if you're going to have her go that way, that means that she's going to carry on saying prophetic things, and the people may or may not listen to them. So that would be the way that her character seems to be going. I'm okay with it. I think she's a good character, and I'm okay with the fact that they didn't just lock her up now in a room and say that's it. That's the end of her character arc. Carolina Clay saying next Alicent will have a blanket on, so we'll know she'll die of the wintertime sickness. Uh, yeah. So she goes swimming. Now we can be a little bit tongue in cheek about this. Obviously, that she sort of nopes out from society and she goes down and she goes swimming in a lake, just to kind of find herself. The way they describe this in the kind of behind the scenes episodes that they've got is that she heads out and she has to come to some kind of peace with herself. And as she's there floating, you can see she looks up in the sky and she sees a bird up ahead. Uh, and that reminds her both of dragons, and also this is like House Arryn, who are up there in the Eyrie, and the Arryns obviously are part of Rhaenyra's heritage. That's part of her sigil, and so she's thinking about Rhaenyra, and so it's like, okay, I do still have a role here. There's something here. Dragons are here. Rhaenyra, I've got a connection with. I can deal with Rhaenyra. So that's the idea that they come up with. I don't think that they showed that very well, um, in as much as I wasn't entirely sure when she started swimming again where she was going. So it wasn't 100% clear to me that she decided to go back to King's Landing. But um, the idea that she, having then gone for a swim, she might die of a wintertime sickness, yeah, it kind of makes it. It doesn't look that cold, though. It has to be said at King's Landing. It will. It's about autumn. It will soon be winter. So maybe they should have shown that being a little bit more cold. Um, let's go Andrew Cage is saying the seeming neurodivergent portrayal of Helena also explains her being much less emotional or emotionally shattered on House of the Dragon. Yeah, that's a really good point. They've definitely played up the idea of Helena being what we would call, they obviously didn't have this language on the show, but what we would call neurodivergent. And so the idea that the emotion, she can't process it, so she's not showing it in the same way, that does work here on the show, I think. Magma Frost 13 saying, Hi, Robert. In the behind the scenes for episode 7, Steve Toussaint, who's the actor who plays Corlys, tells us that Corlys was proud of Addam for making something of himself by his own means, just as Corlys perceives himself to have done. But actually, from our perspective as viewers, I don't think Corlys is correct in thinking that. Addam acquired a dragon because of luck and who his ancestors were. It wasn't actually through any effort of his part. Do you think Corlys will find out? And this might hurt any relationship that might finally form between them. Yeah, so this is an interesting point. Is that he says, if you remember, Corlys just says, well done. As a kind of like a little pat on the head. But this wasn't a thing that Addam did. Addam was actually trying to run away from that dragon, but the dragon found him, Sea Smoke, and almost forced him. And why did Sea Smoke hunt him down? Because Addam is the half brother of Laenor, and as we sort of told that Sea Smoke missed Laenor, was just lonely. So that all kind of makes sense. Will this, as far as Corlys is concerned, be an issue? Because he sees himself as a self-made man, and so he's saying well done to his bastard son for doing a good thing and rising in the world. What if he discovers that it's just nothing to do with him? I don't think this will affect their relationship, for the simple reason that at the moment, the key thing that's driving Corlys, I think, is that he's in mourning. He's in mourning for his wife, Rhaenys, who he perhaps didn't realize at the time quite how much he loved, but after the fact, it's very, very clear. So he is still in this place where his being is in relation to the dead wife that he's always thinking about. And so he's going to be guilty about the fact that he had some bastard children. And the fact that she seemed to know and was a bit cooler about it than he probably thought doesn't actually affect the fact that he's feeling a little bit guilty about this. So he is not going to be the kind of person who's there embracing them, saying, yes, you're my son, yet, because he has to work through his grief. Later, however, what will overcome everything is the fact that he's not got an heir. And that's the point at which he has to go, well, actually, I do have some sons. And the dynamic that they're setting up with Alyn is that those two, although we've not seen them out there, but they both love sailing. Clearly, they both love sailing. And he is being prompted to look for salt and sea and salt. And that is who Alyn is. So when he's worked through all of his grief for his lost wife, that's the point at which he can then start going, now I need to be looking for someone who can be my heir, and who is better than my bastard son, who clearly loves the sea as much as I do. Question from Luna Cascade. When Alicent went to the woods swimming, she saw a small bird flying when she was trying to figure things out. I wonder if she's planning to manipulate Daeron to replace Aemon. She thinks Aegon will die. Now, my understanding is that was a hawk or something along those lines that made her think of House Arryn, rather than thinking about her children at that point. Is she trying to manipulate Daeron to replace Aemon? I don't think she's trying to manipulate Daeron. I think she realizes that Darren was brought up without her, and at some point he's going to come to. He's going to be leading his army up to King's Landing. So I don't think that she's trying to manipulate him. I don't think she thinks she can manipulate him at this point. And we will see. Basically, the high level is that this is her going through some kind of uh, spiritual or religious rebirth in some way. That's the messaging that we've got going on here. So she will realize her place in this, and her place in this um, is not to be manipulating her children. I think that that's a thing that she feels guilty about, and that's a thing that I think she wants some kind of absolution from. Chris saying, "Are we still on track for the fall of King's Landing this season?" Well, for it to happen, yes, definitely. For it to happen this season, they've all of the arcs are set up for this. Is what I will say is that Rhaenyra's arc is that she was starting the season not wanting war, then trying to prevent a war, then trying to prevent a massive war with dragons. And eventually she's got to the point where she's kind of given up on that. And she's given up on the way that her small council are always trying to stop her doing things. And she's just started leading her own life and doing her own thing. And getting the Dragon Riders, she's now got a massive advantage in Dragon Riders. So there's now nothing other than a little bit of a training montage. There's nothing between them and taking King's Landing. Daemon, the character arc is that he went away thinking that he should be king and he's better than this, and he's now learned to ask for help. He's now learned that maybe he doesn't want to be king. Maybe he's not as gifted at leading as he thought he was. And then the Team Green arc is that Aemond has come in and he's sent everyone away. He's making enemies. The army has gone. He said he's going to head off on Vagar as well at some point. So King's Landing will be not defended. All of these points are building up to the final episode. Whether we actually see, and I genuinely don't know, but whether we actually see the fall of King's Landing, or whether that's the beginning of season 3, I don't know. That's but it's going to happen. The way I often said is that up to the end of season 2 is the fall of King's Landing. Whether we actually see that happening then, or whether we see it happening at the very beginning of season 3, is neither here nor there as far as I'm concerned. That's where the arc has gone. Carolina Clay, what do you think of the age gap between Alan and Baela? Do you think they'll change the story to have Baela marry Addam, who looks younger? No, I don't think they'll change the story to make her marry Addam. So the Alan is the one who survives. So Addam, as a dragon rider, the whole point of this story arc is for him is that the dragons and the dragon riders die during the Dance of the Dragons. So he's not long for this world. So her marrying him wouldn't really make sense. Alan will survive, and so he will marry Baela, and they will form a formidable partnership going forward. Will they change that because he looks older? They've also aged up Baela and Rhaena. Both of those have aged up considerably. So, given the fact that we had what looked or was certainly in the book quite an age gap relationship between Corlys and Rhaena, they kind of squashed it a bit, so it didn't look as big an age gap. But in the book, it was a huge age gap relationship. Then I see no reason why they wouldn't just go ahead with this on the show. Okay, let's go to. Well, actually, while I'm here, and I remember two thank yous, the same thank yous I do every time. I will never go bored of these. Patrons, thank you. I hugely appreciate your support. I can't do what I do without your support, so thank you very much. One of my ways of thanking you is by answering your questions here on these live streams. If you would like to support the channel, the best way to do that is through Patreon. There are links appearing well, there'll be a link down below and also probably in the chat if you're watching live. Now, the other thing is moderators. I think you do an amazing job. Today in particular, I know you're on guard. There have been leaks from this season finale. So thank you very much for keeping an eye out for that. But also, if you're there in the chat, you will know that this is a welcoming community. This is a place where debate, discussion are welcomed, and you should never feel as if you're going to be under attack from people for just talking about the things you love. And the people who make that happen are the moderators. So if you are there in the chat, could you just show a little bit of love to the moderators because they are absolutely amazing. So those are my two big thank yous, which I always try to do partway through my live streams. And let's go to a question from Magma Frost saying, I've been thinking about the dragons are gods idea and noticing something interesting in this episode. Anytime Rhaenyra referred to the gods or some act thereof, it seems to make sense to mentally substitute that with the dragons. We know the dragon keepers and some small folk consider the dragons to be gods. I'm starting to wonder if Rhaenyra does as well. We're told her attempt to get Sir Stefan on a dragon was an act of fanaticism, and I think that lends itself to this idea as well. So, does she think they're gods? I don't think she does personally. Her fanaticism is connected, I think, more with prophecy and this idea that she has to be sat on the Iron Throne to save all of humanity. And in order to do that, she has to take whatever steps are necessary. And that's the fanaticism I think that we're seeing with her. I don't think she sees them as gods. I think we're told to think the small folk see them as gods, dragons as gods. Rhaenyra, however, this kind of gets mixed up by the fact that Rhaenyra moves to a position where she thinks that she does not understand how dragon bonding works. And she has seen one example of how it works very clearly. Sea Smoke said, no, I'm not having that Stefan Darkling guy. I'm going to go and find the person I want and then bond with them. And so Rhaenyra has internalized that to say, okay, so whatever the rest of the equation is, one thing which is clearly important is the fact that the dragon must choose the rider in some way, shape, or form. Now, what she does with that then is say, Vermithor, here's 30 people, take your pick. And she knows, and it is fanaticism, because she knows that what she is doing right then is condemning 99% or 95% of those people to death. And that is fanatical. In order to achieve her aim, she is willing to get a whole load of people that she's only just met and say, right, go through that door, and knowing that they will die. That's the fanaticism thing. And this is because she believes that she is the rightful ruler. And I don't think she personally believes that they're gods, but she understands that other people do, which is almost as important. Charis Ballerina, you did a super chat. God's message retracted. I don't know what that was. But you did another super chat saying, will having seen the White Hart contribute to her fanaticism? This is Rhaenyra. How will Daemon react to this and the dragon seeds? So the White Hart thing, this was, if you remember back in season 1, they were all hunting for this White Hart, and she sees it, and she could have killed it or got Christian Cole to kill it and then let it go. the kind of symbolism there was that this person is kind of trapped, everyone's hunting them, but she wants to give that white heart its freedom. And so that was her applying that to herself and saying, I want the freedom. So I don't think that that's what's playing across here. How will Damon react to it and the dragon seeds? I think is a fascinating question. I think Damon will be coming round to this position of which we've seen in this season, that he will say, "Okay, Rhaenyra, yeah, I'm going to come in behind you. I'm going to bend the knee. You're the queen. You do that." So I think that's the route he's going to go down. Pardon me. What he thinks about the dragon seeds, though, is going to be fascinating because that Rhaenyra, you're in charge thing is going to be balanced against the fact that he is set up in this show, all the way through this show, he is set up as the most Valyrian of the Targaryens. He's the one who is there acting very Targaryen, going out, just conquering, doing the Targaryen things. He gives a gift to Rhaenyra of a Valyrian steel necklace. Sounds very Valyrian. He is the person who gets his children learning Valyrian. He himself is reading old tomes about Valyria, and fundamentally, he's the person who most talks in High Valyrian. When he wants to talk privately to Rhaenyra, he talks in High Valyrian. So he is set up as being this champion of High Valyria. So how will he respond to some Targaryen bastards riding the dragons? I don't know, but I suspect he will be aghast. Particularly if you get, and you can well imagine it, Ulf coming up to him and saying, "Hey, you'll never guess we're relatives. Your dad, my dad, we're brothers, basically." I don't think he would react very well to that. So it's not just there's a conceptual issue that I think he will disagree with, but then a personal issue that someone like Ulf White would completely wind him up. Carolina Clay. Robert died while hunting for a white hart. The ball was because he couldn't track it. Yeah, so that's another level that they've set up for this. That this is an echo forward to what happens with Robert Baratheon. Let's get a question from Blitzen saying, as we saw last episode during Vermithor's rampage, the dragons clearly seem to have no issue with killing those, including those with a high amount of Targaryen blood, who attempt to bond with them if they decide they don't like them. So my question is, are there any examples of a trueborn Targaryen actually being killed whilst attempting to bond with a dragon? If not, could this be because they were trained better how to, had the help of the dragon keepers for some other reason? So just sticking with the show for one moment, one thing I think they showed quite well is that dragons are not all the same. We talk about how do you bond with the dragon, and dragons are not all the same. Vermithor was clearly, I'm going to eat a whole load of these, and then it was like, oh, actually, I'm impressed by that guy. That was how he did it. And then we see Silverwing, who, as far as we can tell, was like fast asleep, and then Ulf comes in and she just kind of like sniffs him and go, yeah, you'll do. Are we getting dragon riders again now? All right, this one will do. That seemed a very different character. Then we get Sea Smoke proactively saying, right, okay, you've offered me one I don't want. I'll go and get the one I do want. So they have set up dragons to be different in temperament and also different in how you bond with them. The other half of your question about do we have examples of Targaryens who attempted to bond with dragons and they were killed? No, is the short answer. I mean, I'm happy to, if somebody's found something deep in the weeds of the law, I'm very happy to be contradicted on this. But from what I've seen, no, there is never a Targaryen who's tried to bond with a dragon and then got killed. Now, the show added in extra layers in terms of we see, oh, so Rhaena did try and bond with some dragons, that didn't work. Ditto, Daemon tried to bond with I can't remember who they said before he settled down on Caraxes. So they've set up in show canon a potential dragon rider can try a few different dragons before settling down to the one dragon that they actually bond with. But in the book, no, we don't have any dragons that or Targaryens who approached a dragon trying to bond with them. The dragon just turns around and kills. Emma S., do you think that they will show Sunfire next episode and highlight Aegon and Sunfire's bond through their healing experiences? Well, whether or not Sunfire appears next episode, I think that Sunfire should definitely stay alive. We're not told really what happens, but basically in the book, Sunfire gets left there, and some people try and put Sunfire out of its misery by killing it, but that doesn't really work. And eventually, Sunfire recovers enough to be able to sort of hobble off and go somewhere else. So, are they going to try and echo what happens with Dreamfire and Aegon? Yeah, I think they probably will. I think, however, they will happily leave Sunfire for this season. This can easily be a season 2 thing in terms of arcs. Let's go to a question from Lady Pushkins. Stormcloud appeared quite small at the Vale, and I'm wondering about this and the consequences for Aegon escaping from the Gay Abandon. Do you think the shows will go a different route with this, or next season will there be a time jump? I don't think there's going to be a time jump. I don't think they're going to say, all right, and then nothing happens in the Dance of the Dragons for the next 6 months, 12 months. Let's pick it up. That's not how this seems to be going. I would agree with you. Stormcloud seems far too. Stormcloud was, I don't know what, this big, far too small to be carrying a child. However, we have to remember there's now 3 children on this boat, and the Joffrey is the older of the 3, and Joffrey has got a dragon, Tyraxes. So, I mean, I don't want to guess what happens, but I think that the idea that maybe Stormcloud could fly, but couldn't fly with somebody on their back. Tyraxes, however, we're told is a hatchling, but maybe bigger, should be bigger. And if so, perhaps they're big enough to take 2 Targaryen princes back and away. That kind of makes sense to me, and so they get the 2 Targaryen princes survive because someone has to carry the message about exactly what's happening, and we're really expecting Aegon, who looks like a very small child, to be able to give clear instructions about what's going on. No, Joffrey's probably the person to be doing that. Question from Chris. I love listening to your lives on the houses, by the way. Well, thank you very much. We'll be getting back to that once we've finished doing TV show stuff. Andrew K saying, I loved that House of the Dragon consolidated the dragon bonding attempts into an epic scene to avoid repetitiveness of more individual attempts. Yeah, absolutely. I think they worked that really well in adapting to that to screen. Simon Schaffner saying, what I loved the most about Fire and Blood is the sheer quantity of interesting minor characters and exciting battles and events. So far this season, I've been a little disappointed because although I like the extra stuff they've added, I fear it means they're going to cut a lot of the fun little things that give the story such great texture in Fire and Blood. What types of characters or battles do you think they might still become a part of the story, and what should I give up hope on? Is it possible that they'll have Kristen Cole die without introducing Rob Rivers? Will we get to see the two Allens, Roddy the Ruin, etc.? P.S. I want to get my dad to read A Song of Ice and Fire. He's a huge Tolkien fan and a writer, avid book reader his whole life, but he was put off by the violence and sexual violence in the TV show. Any thoughts on how to convince him to give it a try? Well, you know your dad better than I do, and I mean, I think the first thing to say is that as much as I love this isn't for everyone. There are some people who won't like Game of Thrones, and that's okay. Uh, what I would say though is that if you want an easy access way in, try the Dunk and Egg stories. They're fun. There is some violence, and there are um, sort of more adult themes going on there, but they're not focused on. There's no gratuity in there, so I would suggest doing that. And if your father is a Tolkien fan, then the Silmarillion is full of some uh, pretty heady bits of prose descriptions about what's happening, but Tolkien doesn't focus on the bad things. He doesn't focus in on that kind of stuff, and that's the same with Dunk and Egg. Is that yes, there are some bits of rather gruesome description and the like, but he doesn't. George R. R. Martin there doesn't focus in on them. We're focused in on Dunk as much as anything else. But the first question about smaller characters, yeah, I know exactly what you mean. Is that there's a lot of very small characters who just turn up, are fun or cool, and then disappear in Fire and Blood. What they've done in House of the Dragon is they've taken the important characters who've got smaller roles and beefed them up, given us a backstory, helped us understand their character, that kind of thing. So we get Alf White's got a backstory, Hugh Hammer's got a backstory, Baylor and Rayner. To be honest, at this point in the story in the book, they don't do huge amounts. They're basically being told. So Baylor's been told your dragon's too small for you to ride into combat, and Rayner has gone over to the Vale, but is just there praying over her dragon eggs. So their roles have been beefed up. Are there any uh, small characters that we might expect? I think we'll see. So uh, Benjicott Blackwood, I think we'll see. I think there's a good chance of Roddy the Ruin. When we don't just want random Northerners appearing, that we will be given a lead character for them. And I do wonder, it would be a wonderful, I think, cold open for season 3 even, of um, Sir Sir Byron Swan, that was his name, who he decided that he was going to be the one who was going to put Sunfire out of its misery, and he failed miserably. Now, that would be a great opening to season 3 because it reintroduces us to the world, and it reintroduces us to the idea that we've got Sunfire who is still alive, who, being alive, depending on when they end the season, is very important towards the end of the season. So they could do that and then just leave Sunfire alone for 6 to 8 episodes, as they have here, incidentally, with the Winter Wolves. We get episode 1. Let's have a conversation with the Starks. Oh yes, I'll send some people down. We're still waiting for those people. So it does feel like they're kind of going to bookmark the season with it. Lord Medici, in the real world, for the bride to wear a white dress only became popular after Queen Victoria got married in a white dress. Good fact. In A Clash of Kings, Marcella tells Sansa she'd be wearing a white dress to her wedding because she is the bride. The bride's wearing white is also a Westerosi tradition. Let's assume this tradition was also inaugurated by a queen or lady getting married in white. If you had to guess, how would you speculate uh, made that this was made fashionable? I know there's no answer. I just wanted to ask. Well, I think the answer is that the traditions on what a bride wears seem to be reasonably well set and varies from part of the Seven Kingdoms to part of the Seven Kingdoms. The center point of the marriage ceremony seems to be when the bride, however she's dressed, gets given the cloak of the man that she's marrying. So this is that him ceremonially saying, "You're now part of my family. You're now under my protection." That's the kind of vibe that's going on there. It's the switch from the maiden's cloak to the bride's cloak. Now, in order for that to work as a symbolic thing in world, what you need is the maiden's cloak to be of the house that you were to start with. Now, that doesn't mean you've got to have like a massive Stark sigil there, but you should use, and we get a few different examples of this when we're shown what Sansa, for example, should be wearing, or Jane Poole when she's there pretending to be Arya. It's whites and greys. It's the kind of the feminine version of what the house colors are. So when we go across to other houses, we hear what they're wearing, then it's more their house colors, but perhaps more pastel. The risk of saying, sort of like trying to explain it here. I mean, I'm not great with colors, but that's the general feeling, is that it's you wear your house colors, but in a way which isn't just blaringly obvious out of the way. It's just like a pretty version of the house colors. And then your husband, your new husband, puts his cloak over your shoulders, covering up your old colors. And so now you're in the new colors. And that's the tradition. Auntie Slayer saying, "Hi, Robert, mods and chat. Not sure I'll still be how much I'll be here today, but thank you for all you do." Well, thank you to you. Hugely appreciate that. Great to see you. And let's go with a question from Ms. Fox in Arda. "Hello, Robert and Dan. First off, my husband, who is more of a Tolkien fan than A Song of Ice and Fire, calls Aemond evil Legolas." I can see where he is coming from on that. "Damon, at one point, lists the dragons the Blacks have on Dragonstone and says there are 3 wild or unclaimed dragons. If Sheepstealer is in the Vale, who is the third on Dragonstone after Cannibal and Grey Ghost? Was this an oversight, perhaps?" No, I don't think that. I think it was actually quite good in-world writing. So there are 3 at the start of the Dance of the Dragons. There are Grey Ghost, Cannibal, and Sheepstealer. Now, we're told in world Sheepstealer heads off at some point when the war starts kicking in and there's not many sheep to be found on Dragonstone. That's when Sheepstealer flies off and goes to the Vale. So as far as Damon's concerned, how many are there? Because nobody notices this, it would appear on Dragonstone. They're not really keeping a track on where all of these dragons are. Feel free to comment on that and how wise that might be. But we don't get any comment from Dragonstone going, "Hey, I'm sure we had more dragons than this." It's because they weren't their dragons. These were wild dragons living not in the big cave system, but out in their own lairs. So if Damon says 3, that's because he thinks there's 3. He's wrong, is the short answer. There are 2, but he thinks there's 3. And then you're asking also, do you think that the Silverwing bit was a ploy to lure Aemond out, or was she going on a joyride? It seems dangerous to give away your cards to the Greens instead of shock and awe them at the next confrontation with all the dragons. So, yeah, why was it that Silverwing flew over King's Landing? I think the key is that Ulf did not have control of Silverwing. So this is possibly partly Silverwing just flying over. Yeah, oh yeah, this used to be my home, and we've seen that several times. But also, this is possibly Ulf White, who's there thinking, these guys down there, they sent me off. They didn't think I was going to be able to claim a dragon. I will show to them I am now riding a dragon. So some combination of the dragon and the rider wanted to just go to King's Landing and show off for a little bit and then head back. So that's the broad idea. I don't think it was a Rhaenyra tactical play. I think it's just what happened. Luna Cascade saying, according to George R. R. Martin, aren't dragons territorial? Don't they stay relatively close to Dragonstone? Yes, absolutely. And this is a book canon versus show canon thing. George R. R. Martin made it very clear that he disagreed with what happened with Sheepstealer. He says this is basically, this is not book canon. This is show canon. So if we're talking about in show, if somebody says, I think there are 3 dragons, wild dragons on Dragonstone, then that's what they think at that moment of time. In books, then nobody would think that the dragons would go fly elsewhere because they never have done. Question from Catherine Fursith. House of the Dragon has provided us with a lot of new dragon lore, at least in show canon. As well, we get a lot of information about the extent of weirwood magic or old gods magic affecting Harrenhal and the people who dwell there. Looking back as well as forward in the history of the whole of A Song of Ice and Fire universe, which events will, in your opinion, have been equally affected by this magic at Harrenhal? And also, do you think such magical hubs exist somewhere else, such as High Heart, etc.? Well, it's possible, but the way they've set this up is that the heart tree, I mean, I say call it a god's wood. It's not really a wood. It's one tree. But the weirwood tree is there, pushing out into the God's Eye Lake. All of the branches seem to be looking in that direction. And so this is set up as being, this is the God's Eye Lake's extension out onto the land. That's what we've got going on here. The Isle of Faces. So, which events in history, Westerosi history, possibly affected by it? Almost certainly the turning at Harrenhal, the beginning of Robert's Rebellion. We've speculated on this for a long time, so this is not a surprise. But surely the old gods were involved in what was going on there. And then we get 2 great councils held there. The Great Council of 101 concluded that Daemon should be the person who succeeds. Okay. The second one says that Aegon V, who was known as Aegon the Unlikely, should succeed. That was the one that Bloodraven was leading on, and the upshot was that Aegon V, rather than other people who may have had better claims, he became the king. So that felt like Bloodraven potentially slightly manipulating the result of that to get the person that he wanted onto the Iron Throne. Rasla, how do you think the show will tactically justify Aemond flying out of King's Landing to confront Daemon? Even in the book, it comes across as a major tactical error with so many dragons literally on King's Landing doorstep. So yeah, in the book, Aemond sends out the army, and he goes out with the army on Dragonback, and they head up to Harrenhal because we're told this is the justification, because Aemond thought that the biggest threat was Daemon. Rhaenyra, he didn't seem to rate for whatever reason. He thought the big threat was Daemon, so he went out there and tried to find him. Now, Daemon had discovered this. He got spies in King's Landing. He got the news, and then he left Harrenhal. So when Aemond arrives up there in the army, they arrive up there. Daemon's gone. Daemon has headed down and is taking King's Landing. So it's a complete outmaneuver. Aemond just you can sense his frustration, because next up he goes out and he just burns a whole load of villages. He's really angry. He kills all of the strongs that he can find. He's fuming about what happened, partly because I suspect he realizes this was his decision, his fault. So how might they justify this on the show? Well, he has seen the Dragon Riders. He has seen that Rhaenyra now has an advantage over him. He's not stupid. He realizes that Vhagar could not take all of them on. We've seen in the trailer that he tries to get Helena to get on her dragon. She will almost certainly say no. So from his perspective, what's actually the most pragmatic approach here? Does he stay in King's Landing and just wait for the dragons to come in and kill him? No. Does he go for a little wander and explore nature and let King's Landing fall, but then become closer to himself in some way? No, that doesn't really seem where they've taken this. Running away strikes me as being the biggest option. Whether they actually admit that he's running away, I don't know. But the fact that he could abandon King's Landing, the army's already gone, and he abandons King's Landing, it kind of implies that he was just trying to save his own skin. I don't know whether that's how they'll do it on the show, but he's seen Rhaenyra can defeat him at any time, and so he's just going to get out of there. Let's go to a question from Rassler. Jace's concerns in this episode are actually very valid. If he did become king, he would always have to deal with the bastard talk. And now another bastard with silver hair is out there, and Rhaenyra let him claim a dragon larger than Jace's, putting him at a major disadvantage if Hugh or even Ulf did decide to challenge him. Do you think Rhaenyra appreciates the potential danger she is placing Jace into, and what do you expect? What do you think Daemon would think of the Dragon Seas? Well, we've already covered what Daemon might think. In terms of the bigger picture with Jace, yeah, I'm 100% with this idea that he sees the potential danger to him, and it's now up to Rhaenyra to respond to that, and she's basically just said, I don't care. I'm just doing my thing. So the intriguing point is the fact that we get an already quite disrupted relationship between Rhaenyra and her heir. And now he's there, has said, and it's one thing for him to say, I disagree with your tactical decisions here. Another thing on top of that was that, yeah, so I don't think this is a very clever idea to be collecting on a conceptual level, to be collecting Dragon Riders. And then it's another thing again for him to go to her to say, actually, this affects me personally. If you think that you've guaranteed that I will inherit, then that's not the case at all. So they are setting up the fact that Jace and Rhaenyra are not seeing eye to eye. Question from 444 saying, Hi, Robert. Do you think that Rhaenyra will legitimize all three dragon seeds? Addam will be the strong candidate for all Corlys's heir, but the other two will be then in line of succession for the Iron Throne. Ulf claims to be a son of Balon, the father of Viserys and Daemon. Hugh, per my understanding, claims to be a son of Sarah, daughter of Jaehaerys and Alicent. Yes, so you're right on all of those bits there. I think what I would say is that Corlys Velaryon has to first recognize those children as his own, because Addam very clearly said, I'm from Hull, I'm a shipwright, you won't know me, I can tell you who my mother is, my father is of no consequence. And that's it. That's all Rhaenyra knows. So until Corlys decides to say, yep, or recognize them as his children, then she's not going to do anything, really. Might she then legitimize them? Yeah, I think the implication is that they are, from largely that moment onwards, uh, uh, they are recognized as being from sorry. Let me rewind. From the moment that Corlys recognizes them, then I think that Rhaenyra will legitimize them. The other two are, I think, a different uh, kettle of fish. I think that she will not. She will probably ask them at some point. So, who are you? How do you fit into this whole family tree? And I'm sure they'll say it. But I think that even she would think legitimizing these people throws an extra few people into the hat for uh, disputing my son's inheritance. So I think that the answer will be no, she won't. And with, I think that was my last House of the Dragon question. I've got a few Song of Ice and Fire questions, then a couple of questions about Lord of the Rings, but carry on dropping questions in the chat. I'll pick up as many as I can. Mr. Worldwide saying, Hello, Robert and the good boy Dan. What sort of character changes do you expect to see from Jon Snow? This is in the Song of Ice and Fire. I quite like the idea of his hair becoming more pale, maybe streaks of Valyrian silver, and his more Targaryen traits showing through as his nature begins to take the place of nurture. I mean, those things might happen. But the biggest change for Jon Snow in the book is going to be what happens as a result of him walking into his direwolf for so long. We don't know how long he's going to do it, but what we are told is that the longer a skin changer walks into their bonded animal, the more like that animal they become. Other things kind of disappear. They're having to work with the brain patterns that are there already, and so they will start to get more like that animal until eventually they can become consumed and subsumed within that animal. So, what does that mean for the character of Jon Snow? I think it means that once he comes back, once he is brought back, he would have spent a long time uh, walking into Ghost, and we therefore have to look for signs of him being more like a wolf. Jon will become more wolfish. What does that mean? Well, your guess is as good as mine. Maybe it means that he can be more um, violent. Maybe it means that he can be more pack-like, but also quite okay on his own as a kind of a lone wolf kind of figure. Maybe he will be quieter. We know that Ghost doesn't make a sound, so maybe if he's there with Ghost, then he will kind of pick that up. We should definitely expect him to be a darker character and more wolfish character when we get to his chapters in the next book. Wanda Ray saying, I know you're going through a Feast for Crows at the moment and wanted to ask if there's been anything you've picked up on that you haven't before or something interesting. For me, I've enjoyed taking a close look at Cersei's declining grasp on reality and descent into erratic Mad Queen behavior, and wanted to tie that in to if you think House of the Dragon will take Rhaenyra on the arc that Dany deserved in the Game of Thrones show and give us a bittersweet ending to what could have been a great ruler. Well, she's definitely going on a darker path Rhaenyra, it has to be said. But picking up on your first question is about what I have found. I'm rereading or re-listening, because I'm listening to the audio, re-listening my way through A Feast for Crows. What have I picked up on? Yeah, I think the thing that you've picked up on, the Cersei descent into paranoia and the links across to the Mad King, was something that I've picked up on a lot. So she's first introduced as a POV character in a dream where she's sat on the Iron Throne, and she has this dream about setting up a white marble city across the other side of the Blackwater, which is something that Aerys II had thought. And then the deeper in we get, we see her staring up at Wildfire, and Jamie thinks that she looks like Aerys II. And then she gets more and more paranoid about everyone is out to get her in a way that Aerys II was. So the parallels between her and him are very strong. The other thing I would just sort of pick up on is rumors of dragons. The fact is that Dany, for most of this story, with her dragons coming back, takes place a long way away in Essos. But what we have here is the first murmurings that maybe there are dragons there. In particular, you get the prologue, which is from Pate's perspective. We focus a lot in the fact that the person who he kind of meets is almost certainly Jack and Hagar. Why on earth are they down there? Big question. But also, it introduces us to this idea that the sailors who have been to Carth and Marine and have now come over to port city like Old Town, they are full with this story that the dragons are back. The moment the people realize and understand that it changes the dynamic. And you get someone like Euron who's obsessed with claiming a dragon. You get Bravos, who will be focused in on, okay, so you've got dragons, but also you got rid of slavery, which we're very much in favor of. And are there going to be any old houses who come out of the woodwork in Westeros who still all they were waiting for to declare for the Targaryens is for the Targaryens to be back with dragons? So expect the ripple effects of this understanding that there are dragons there to be playing out across the whole narrative. Paris Ballerina. In drafts in A Dance with Dragons, Maelys sacrificed his 4-year-old son to birth dragons. Do you think this was transferred to Egg, and is this the cause of Summerhall? So he made a sacrifice of his son in order to try and kill dragons. I don't think that we're expected to see Aegon sacrificing his own family. I mean, in fact, actually, what happened seems to have been the reverse of whatever the plan was, because we get a Targaryen born. Rhaegar is born there at the tragedy at Summerhall. We get sacrifices, perhaps unintentional ones. Duncan, Sir Duncan the Tall, Duncan the firstborn son of Aegon V, and Aegon himself. So we get some pretty big and impressive sacrifices, as it were. And what happened was we get the birth of a dragon, so to speak, being Rhaegar. Sonto saying, I'm wondering if this is spoiler free for future episodes of House of Dragon. We've only got one more episode to go. But yes, so the rule here is that show spoilers are not okay. We will happily talk about what's in trailers and things like that, but not anything about the leaks which have come out. Book spoilers are okay. So I will happily talk about things which happen in the future in the books. Whether or not they happen on the show is open to speculation, and it's entirely up to you. Commander Ray saying, I know you. Oh no, I've just done that one. Sorry. DickCrabb'sSquire saying, hello, Robert. What is your take on Leo Tyrell? I cannot decide if I despise him or like him. On the surface, he seems to be an unsavory character. On the other hand, he appears to be a believer in Marwyn's ideas, and that may give the impression that maybe he is not such a one-dimensional character and may end up being an ally of Sam and the Sphinx. So he's this character. He appears in 2 chapters. The prologue to A Feast for Crows, or Dance with Dragons, sorry, and Sam's last chapter there. And he comes across, he's spoilt. He's a member of the Tyrell family. He's at Old Town, theoretically there to be learning a few links to get onto a chain to become a maester. But we meet him down the pub, basically, where he's run out of coin and he's trying desperately to get people to buy him a drink. But he doesn't do this in a nice way. He's just like trying to passively aggressively most of the time push people into getting a drink, and they're not responding. Should we dislike him? On the face of it, yes, he doesn't seem like a nice character at all. Is there another side to him? Well, possibly. We get this when he gives this lovely little speech, which implies that he knows a lot about what's going on, but actually isn't sort of taking it seriously at a personal level. He says, dragons and darker things is what's going on in the world, says Leo. The grey sheep have closed their eyes, but the mastiff sees the truth. Old powers waken, shadows stir. An age of wonder and terror will soon be upon us. An age for gods and heroes. He stretched, smiling his lazy smile. That's worth a round, I'd say. So, what we're being invited to see here with him is that this is somebody who actually knows what's going on, but he doesn't take it seriously. And so I think we're invited to not like him personally because he doesn't he sees what's the truth of it out there. The White Walkers are coming, the dragons, we need to do something about this, but he doesn't want to do anything about it. And there is another kind of possibility here. He comes in, he starts at the pub, and he's sort of like going, oh, they'll let anyone in these days. You'll never guess who it is. It should just be noble lords' sons, but they're letting anyone in. And we get this kind of idea also that Alaras, the great student that we also meet in that chapter, she is probably Sorella in disguise, clever disguise, turn your name back to front, who is one of the Sand Snakes, one of Oberyn Martell's daughters. Now, what does this mean? Is that Leo, probably could be the person who exposes her, who says, I've realized who you are. He's already kind of hinted that she's got some kind of noble birth and that she's got a secret. If he figures it out, then he might well try and get her expelled or more, because she's not the kind of person, she's a woman, not the kind of person who should be there in his world. Jack Mayat saying, "Hi Robert, hope you're well. What is something you believe that the others or the majority don't, and why? Personally, I support Vampire Roost / Bolt On. It's a fun theory. What do I mean, I don't. I am asked this from time to time. most of my views are quite broadly accepted. I think the things that I would say slightly fewer than 100% of people go with the Crypts of Winterfell. I'm very much, and I should redo these videos at some point, but I'm very much of the view that the statues will come to life. When the Horn of Winter is blown, the statues of the Stark Lords will come to life and march out of the Winterfell crypts and come to the aid of the Starks. That's a thing that I feel quite so. The amount of times they're anthropomorphized is literally every single time. So I feel quite strongly on that. I feel quite strongly on Howland Reed and Tyrell-Dayne getting together, which again some people do, but I don't think it's an overwhelming majority yet. And I also think, when in doubt, blame Bloodraven. That all sensible people will leave, but maybe that's not 100% view. Carolina Clay saying, "Do you believe there are still dragon eggs in King's Landing and Dragonstone? Did Rhaegar and Viserys have eggs in their cradle?" So in the A Song of Ice and Fire timeline, are there still dragon eggs? I think the answer is no. There, I mean, there could be. Robert Baratheon doesn't really seem to pay huge amounts of attention about, oh, I've got all of this wealth, whatever. There could be some lying around, but none of them hatch. And that's, I think, the important point, is that whatever dragon eggs are left, none of them hatch. Did Rhaegar and Viserys have eggs in their cradles? Not as far as we're aware. I mean, the implication in the text, although there are huge gaps in the narrative, the implication is that 7 of them were at the tragedy at Summerhall, and they got destroyed in the conflagration. Whether that's true or not, that seems to be the implication of what we're told. The Lady Eternal saying, "Good time to you, Robert and Dan, and to you too. In the second season finale trailer, there's a dragon breathing green flames. Which do we believe it is?" I have to admit, I've not focused too much on the trailer, but I think, yes, we're seeing Tessarion in the trailer. Cast Ballerina saying, "Show Tommen and Bran both fall out of windows. Joff and Robb both die at weddings. What parallel might we get with a Stark and the fate of Myrcella?" Okay, this is quite interesting. So Tommen and Bran both fall out of windows. True. Joff and Robb both die at weddings. True. What other parallel about Myrcella? Well, Myrcella in the books hasn't died yet. So we'll have to wait and see. I mean, my instinct is that she's going to die at the hands of the Sand Snakes. So how's that going to happen? Maybe poison? Is that going to be something that happens to any of the Starks? Maybe. I mean, I don't know. I don't think this is the. I don't think we've got enough information yet to either say that this is a clear pattern, or to say that we know exactly how any of those characters or Myrcella is going to be dying. I hope that doesn't sound too much like a cop out, but I don't think we're there yet. Lady Vaughan Strauss saying, "Hello, Robert. I hope all is well." It is, thank you. George R. Martin seems pretty good about queer inclusion. As an asexual person, I have often been fascinated by Lord Varys's character. On the show, Varys expressed that he was asexual even before he was cut. Although quite young, some of us figure it out pretty early. Is the same true in the novels? Are there more instances where he points out that he never did experience attraction to either gender? Are there any other asexual characters of which you're aware? I often wonder if Baelor the Blessed counts, but he's hard to suss out. Yeah, so Baelor the Blessed, the implication was that he wasn't asexual. The implication was that he did find his wife and other women attractive, but he thought that that was wrong and he'd be damned to hell for it. And so he had to protect himself from it. If he wasn't even slightly attracted to people, then I suspect the Maiden Vault wouldn't have had to exist because it wouldn't be a thing for him. That said, there are a few characters that I do personally suspect might be asexual in some way or demisexual. I think the Blackfish is one, Brendan Tully. We get the his breakdown with his brother, Hoster Tully. It comes because Hoster tries to marry him off to someone, and then we get the Blackfish just saying no. I'm not doing that. I'm not marrying someone. Now, some people have speculated perhaps this is because he's gay, but we've had nothing, no hint at all. We've had he was over there in the Vale for a very long time, and he seems to have just left when he decides it's time to go. With Catelyn, he just says, "Okay, I'll grab my things and let's go." He doesn't think I've got this loved one over here. I just need to go and talk to them first and tell them what's going on. There's no indication that he's got any kind of personal relationship going on there. There's no implication that he had any kind of personal relationship going on when we're dealing with the Hoster-Tully fallout. So he's a character that I instinctively think is probably asexual. We get Aerys the first, Aerys the second, no, Aerys the first seems to have been so focused on his books and the like that he just didn't have time for his wife. So asexual, certainly in practice, seems to be the case. And then we get this guy called Vaymond, who is one of Jaehaerys and Alicent's sons, who again is bookish, but we're told that the Grand Maester even they wanted to sort of like get him hooked up with one of the other Targaryens, even gave him a book of bawdy images or saucy stories or something. I can't remember the exact phrase, but basically, we're told that he read the book, but that didn't seem to change anything. He didn't seem to be at all interested in anyone. So I think we've got a few um, uh, possibilities here, strong possibilities. Sam, if Jaime finds out about Jon Snow's parentage, how do you think he will react? Will he keep his oath to Rhaegar to protect his family, and how? It's an interesting question. So Jaime is tortured by the fact that he broke his Kingsguard vows. He knows he did the right thing, but still, in his weirwood vision, then he sees Rhaegar and the others basically accusing him, saying, "You have abandoned your post. You went against your vows," and that does seem to really hurt him. If he finds out that Rhaegar did have another son, yeah, I could see him getting quite protective. I mean, they're not as it's not as clear cut a case here. This is like a bastard son, not a son that he'd been aware of at the time, but he might well see this as some kind of um, way of exercising his own personal demons. Martin S. saying, "Good evening, Robert. Good evening to you too, sir. I almost forgot today's live stream, but fortunately I came to think of it. Well, it's great to see you. Thank you so much for being here." And we have Lord Medici saying, "Hello, Robert and Dan the dog. This obviously doesn't happen in the books, and it might be too tinfoily, but the World Book does mention ice dragons. Some of George R. Martin's non-Song of Ice and Fire work also touches on these creatures. In fact, there's a book called The Ice Dragon that he wrote. Would it be possible to recruit some to participate in the dance? They are mentioned to be far larger than normal dragons, after all." Ice dragons do get quite a few mentions, it has to be said. So, to be 100% clear, George R. Martin has written about ice dragons outside of A Song of Ice and Fire. He wrote the book, The Ice Dragon, but has very clearly said that is not set in the A Song of Ice and Fire universe. So we shouldn't take that as a fact about something that's happened beyond the borders of Westeros. But we read this in the world of Ice and Fire. Of all the queer and fabulous denizens of the Shivering Sea, however, the greatest are the ice dragons. These colossal beasts, many times larger than the dragons of Valyria, are said to be made of living ice, with eyes of pale blue crystal and vast translucent wings through which the moon and stars can be glimpsed as they wheel across the sky. Whereas common dragons, if any dragon can truly be said to be common, breathe flame, ice dragons supposedly breathe cold, a chill so terrible that it can freeze a man solid in half a heartbeat. Sailors from half 100 nations have glimpsed these great beasts over the centuries, so mayhaps there is some truth behind the tales. Archmaester Margate has suggested that many legends of the north, freezing mists, ice ships, Cannibal Bay, etc., can be explained as distorted reports of ice dragon activity. Though an amusing notion, and not without a certain elegance, this remains the purest conjecture. As ice dragons supposedly melt when slain, there is no actual proof of their existence. No actual proof of their existence has ever been found. So they get a big write-up in the world of Ice and Fire, and then a conclusion that they probably don't exist. I don't think ice dragons are going to play a role in the story. Let's put it that way. But symbolically, they do. Jon is an ice dragon. Symbolically, there's a constellation called the Ice Dragon, and he's the person most associated with it. There's a star in there that helps point north, and he follows that star a few different times. He is ice and fire, which is an ice dragon. So that is the kind of the imagery behind him. And whenever we get the ice dragon in the main story, most of the time it's symbolism leading up to Jon Snow. Question from the Lady Eternal. Much like dogs in real life, dragons seem to scent and react negatively to fear. Why didn't Rhaenyra try to prepare the dragon seeds better? Let them see the dragons in flight, teach them the Valyrian commands. So on the first part, yes, one of the only instructions that we have, the dragon keepers said to Sir Stefan, don't show fear. They seem to be able to pick up on that. And that seems to be when Vermithor was like breathing fire and eating people. He could definitely sense fear. So that's one of the elements that we've got here in this makeup of how does dragon bonding work. They don't like someone who's fearful of them. Now, why didn't she try to prepare them better? Because she was of the opinion that she now does not know how this works. You and I might go, yeah, but surely she can figure out some stuff. A few simple Valyrian phrases, whatever. But her approach seems to have been, right, here we go, 30 people who are possibles, go in there and I'll just watch and see if any of them survive. That seems to be her approach. She seems to be now saying it's up to the dragon. It's not up to me. I'm not the person who's going to go in there and make this dragon bonding happen. The dragon has to choose, because I saw it happen with Addam and Sea Smoke. So that seems to be her new approach. And no, she didn't think that there was a need for that, because Addam Velaryon didn't know anything. He didn't have any Valyrian keywords to say. So why should that be different for these other people? Martin S. saying were all Palantiri, this is a Lord of the Rings question, were all Palantiri considered equal, or were some, for instance, the Osgiliath stone considered greater? If some Palantiri were greater, what powers did they have that the others did not? So yes, one which was in the towers right at the far west of far west of the Shire, even heading towards the Grey Havens. One of them was different in that you couldn't look through it anywhere. It was focused in heading west, and so you could just look to see whether you could just about maybe make out the hint of the edges of the Undying Lands. So that one was different. The Osgiliath stone was bigger and was therefore considered greater in some way. Now, when Tolkien did do an essay on the Palantir, but he didn't really talk about that element of it, what makes it better. I think the implication is that the normal smaller stones, they yes, you can use them to sort of look around at various different things, but they kind of lock in on the thing that they're supposed to be locked in on. The Osgiliath stone, the implication is that it can do anything. It can go anywhere, and there's no kind of like this one's paired up with that one, which certainly happened with the other two in Gondor. So yeah, you can see further. Maybe you could see further back in time, and it's not linked in with anything else in particular. Let's go to Catherine Furseth. In your last video on when Aegon's prophecy was lost, you speculate that Rhaegar thought that the return of winter after the false spring was the start of the prophecy coming true, meaning the start of the long night. He therefore set out to find Lyanna with the intention of making the third head of the dragon with her, so to speak. However, why her? We have all the speculations about their relationship or friendship starting at the tourney at Harrenhal, but this doesn't mean that they weren't necessarily in love. Did Rhaegar seek out a woman who he simply liked or who he thought would be suitable to the job? Was there something related to the prophecy itself that made him think Lyanna was the ice part of the Song of Ice and Fire? Did he find something in old text, etc.? Should we blame Bloodraven? Well, we should definitely blame Bloodraven. I'll give a nod again. I gave a hat tip in the video, but I was first alerted to this idea at the Red Mice at Play blog. Do go and check that out. It is excellent. And what the observation there was that if we've got this idea of Aegon's prophecy, which is that there's a winter, a huge, horrible winter, which kind of grows and blows out of the far north, and on the winds, hidden in that darkness, there comes death. So, if you believe that to be true, you're on the lookout for a winter. Now, what happened during that time of the tourney at Harrenhal and just afterwards? Well, it's with retrospect described as the year of the false spring. What that means is that there was a winter, and then spring came, and they had the tourney at Harrenhal. Everyone got invited, and then after the tourney at Harrenhal, winter suddenly appeared again, and not just normal winter, a really, really harsh winter. The Blackwater, the River Blackwater, which is that massive one that flows down by King's Landing, that froze, and there were icicles on the ramparts of the Red Keep. Aerys II hated it so much he asked the pyromancers to burn wildfire on the walls, try and use their magics to stop the winter from coming in. This was massive, and it was unexpected. You thought it felt out of time to them. We had winter, we had autumn, we had winter, we had spring, and now what? We're going back to winter. This will have felt to him like, given how focused on prophecy he was, like, this is it. This is the winter. So that seems to have been what gave him the kind of the kick to move on with this. In terms of why Lyanna, I think there's a fair chance they could have fallen in love. I think we have to accept the fact that this was at Harrenhal, and almost from what we've seen on the TV show, then almost certainly we've got the old gods interfering in some way. But on a more practical level, we get Rhaegar going, well, I can't have another son. Pardon me. I can't have another son with my wife because she's been told if she has another child, then she'll probably die. And he seems to be naming his children. He says there must be three. The dragon must have three heads. So he's naming his children after the original three Targaryens. He's got Aegon, he's got Rhaenys, he now needs Visenya. Visenya, as a character, was very warlike. She rode her dragon into combat all the time. And so you can imagine on the basis of that, he would think, well, who do I want to be the mother of the child that I'm going to name Visenya? Well, somebody who's clearly good at combat. And what happens at the tourney at Harrenhal? Well, almost certainly we'll have to wait and see what we get shown in the stage play of this. But almost certainly Lyanna is the Knight of the Laughing Tree who defeats 3 people in combat and then kind of disappears. So we should expect him to go, okay, I need somebody who will probably give birth to a son who's very, or son, sorry, a daughter who's very warlike, compared particularly to my very sweet and humble wife over here. There was that woman that I really liked at Harrenhal. That seems to be the kind of feel that we've got going on. But we could certainly expect to see the Weirwood Network intervene. Maybe we're always talking about what happens here with Rhaegar and his approach to prophecy. What if Lyanna's there and she names herself after a Weirwood tree? Her knight character that she takes on, which seems to imply that she's very much into the whole Weirwood northern culture. What if the Weirwood tree there spoke to her? What if actually she's part of this driving force? It's not just Rhaegar coming in and sweeping her away. What if she's a part of this and she's actually there trying to persuade him of something? It's possible. So I've got a couple more questions about the Rings of Power that I will quickly answer. And Gina Z saying, hi Robert, with the end of season 2 of House of the Dragon, I'll admit I haven't been paying much attention to the Rings of Power, but season 2 is almost here. Will you be doing a breakdown of the second trailer that dropped last week? Yes, so the trailer, and it's an extensive trailer, 3.5 minutes long, which got dropped at Comic-Con, so I think probably over the weekend. I did watch it. I thought it was pretty good, actually, as trailers go. I don't think I have also been focusing on House of the Dragon for obvious reasons. I don't think I'm going to do a breakdown of it. Maybe I could have done straight away that day, but it's because it was so long. It's quite a lot of work, and I'm focusing in on House of the Dragon right now. So no, I think there are plenty of other great channels out there. I'm sure will have done a breakdown of it. But Maura Lee also asked about the trailer. What about Tom Bombadil? What I think about Tom Bombadil appearing? So, and that's the last of my questions here from my patrons. So this is your last chance to get questions over there in the chat. Tom Bombadil is an enigmatic character. If you don't know him very well, I did a video who is Tom Bombadil very recently, if you want to go check that out. But he doesn't appear in the Peter Jackson films. He comes across anachronistic in almost every way, hugely powerful, but not interested in power. He does appear in the trailer for The Rings of Power. So he's going to be appearing. We have had an article and a sort of placed article interview with the showrunners about this from a couple of weeks ago. And they basically say, yeah, we've tweaked the character slightly. He's not going to be in his normal home. He's going to be off in his holiday home over far to the east. In the books, then he's very much this neutral character, not wishing to push things on anyway. But we're going to tweak that a little bit. So he's there. I think despite all of these other things, there are two concerns, before I get into things that I'm looking forward to, two concerns. The first concern is that he doesn't appear jolly enough. Tom Bombadil should appear a whole load of fun and jolly, with singing silly rhymes. The images that we've seen of him so far, he actually looks quite serious, concerned about the state of the world. That might just be trailers, but we'll wait and see on that. The second concern I have is this idea that the showrunners noticed and acknowledged the fact that Tom Bombadil does not proactively get involved in the politics and wars of the rest of Middle Earth. He stays out of it, and he doesn't even want to know or talk about it. But the implication of what we heard is on the show that he went over to Rune to try and find somebody to try and achieve an end that he wanted, which doesn't feel like Tom Bombadil. He goes out boating and sings silly songs, and that's largely it. In terms of what I'm looking for, so the guy, I've forgotten his name, the guy playing him is a good actor. He's been in a whole load of things, and I'm really pleased to see Tom Bombadil on screen. So those are the sort of the upsides. I will happily give it an open mind when it comes out. So let's have a quick flick through the chat. Jordan Vicarious saying, thanks for the awesome content. Well, thank you. What is your plan for covering the Rings of Power? Will it be similar to House of the Dragon? I'm so happy for you they didn't air at the same time again. Yeah, that was hard work. They were at the same time. And they've even given me a little break between the two. So I will be off for a week at some point between the two, just so you're aware. So there will be a week without live stream in about 2 or 3 weeks' time. But what's my plan? I haven't come up with a full plan yet. The episodes drop Thursday night, Friday morning, depending on where you are in the world. And that means that these Thursday live streams I will probably turn into pre-show live streams. So that's the first part. Pardon me. I will do episode breakdowns of the episodes as they come out, and I will also try and do lore breakdowns of things. That I'm going to cover it. I mean, I think in reasonable detail. Perhaps not quite as much as I did House of the Dragon, but there will certainly be a huge uptick in the amount of Tolkien videos coming out. Martin S. I get the impression that most Palantiri are roughly soccer ball sized, but that the Palantir of Osgiliath is much larger. Are there any other large ones? Now, I think that was the largest one. I think the Orthanc one was a bit bigger than it appeared on the show. Let me have a think about this. I will come back to you on my next live stream and let you know the sizes of the Palantir, so the Palantiri. So yeah, you can have a proper answer on that one. Reflective Rambling saying, personal opinion, Tom, we know is the result of this is how I'm going to protect the spirit of Middle Earth that he treasures. I'll give it a shot. Well, to heck with them. Oh, diddly, yeah. So, I mean, if we take the spirit of Tom Bombadil, then we shouldn't get too worked up about it. We'll see it, we'll enjoy it, or we won't enjoy it. Andrew Kay saying, you've earned a holiday. Well, thank you very much. Thanks again for the hard work producing content during House of the Dragon. Yeah, thank you so much. Yeah, Reflective Rambling wondering whether the serious Tom Bombadil that we seem to be seeing is that let me find someone to do the job I need to go and live my life so I don't have to deal with all of this junk. Yeah, absolutely. It's entirely possible that that's the way they're going. Matthew Baratheon saying, Hugh Hammer, this is on House of the Dragon, mentions he could not protect his wife, then that he couldn't keep their daughter alive. The second the daughter is mentioned, his wife pulls back her hand. Yeah, I don't know if you're implying anything in that, but basically, as far as his story is concerned, he says that he's going to get a dragon because he couldn't protect his family, and now he thinks having a dragon is there. Matthew Baratheon saying, I think that maybe Hugh's daughter was a baby of abuse, that his wife feels like he rejected her idea to leave the city because her daughter wasn't his blood, and then with him embracing his his actual. Oh, sorry, I put on a delay on that when you get allowed to post content, but I think I get the idea. Um, I suspect they're not going into that much detail about him and his family. I think we've had the background to him. I think we know the main point that he loves his family and that he went to find a dragon because A, he wanted to embrace his Targaryen heritage, but B, he wants to be able to protect his family. Um, Sid K saying for the show, I was starting to think Addam and Alyn might be sons of Vaemond, which would be interesting, giving us treatment of Rhaenyra's children. Yeah, I mean they're very much playing up now that this is. I mean, they haven't outright 100% said it, but the very clear implications that they're Corlys's. And quick flick through. April May saying when Alice says Damon, they are but says they are but pieces, not the players. The players are the dragons, at least some of the real players. So yeah, but it's not just the dragons, also the Weirwood network, I think is what she's implying there. Okay, and I think with that, let's start drawing this one to a close. We have got another live stream, a pre-show live stream, which will be the same time, but on Sunday for the finale. And if you are watching these videos back a little bit later, appearing somewhere here is going to be a link to my other videos that I've made. Live streams appearing somewhere here is my link to Patreon, which is the best way to support this channel if you wish to do so. But thank you so much, moderators. Thank you hugely for your work here today. I know there's lots of spoilers out there, but you've done a fantastic job. Patrons, thank you. I hugely appreciate what you do. But everyone, take care, and I'll see you in a couple of days.